Why do you hang around with the worst crowd, the worst crowd? It's gonna hurt me, 'cause you're with the worst.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 27 and what we're calling the beginning of season 2 of Third Man In. I'm Mike Hickey, and I am joined by...
It's Charles.
And yeah, both the boys are here. We're excited to get going. We got a big one today for you.
We've been renewed for season 2.
We've been renewed for a second season for what that's worth. Of course, we have our show brought to you by Head Check Health, who have been supporting the show since day one. They're still on board, and we are happy to have them. And we have a very special guest today with someone we're really excited about. And Chuck has been we've already recorded the interview, so at this point Chuck's coming down off the high. But
we had to record this segment after the interview because I probably wouldn't have been able to speak. I just would have kind of been sitting here tearing up a napkin, being like, "Let's do this, let's do this, let's do this." So I'm a lot calmer now. I didn't Chris Farley show it. If anyone remembers the Saturday Night Live skit where Chris Farley just has all of these mega celebrities on there, and it's just like, "Hey, Die Hard, Bruce Willis, remember that time you were on the roof? That was awesome." I didn't do that.
I know you didn't, which I was really impressed with.
Checked talking about the last waltz with a Canadian icon off the old bucket list there.
Yeah, it was epic, and I can't thank TR enough here for getting his good friend Mr. Ron MacLean on the show. I mean, if anybody who's seeing right now has clicked on the thing, they see that it says Ron MacLean. They've seen the picture of Ron MacLean on the thumbnail. They've seen all these things. They know it's Ron MacLean. We got to talk to Ron MacLean, and it was very, very cool. So that interview will be coming up in just a little bit. But how's everybody doing? It's been a long summer.
It's actually no. It's been a short summer for me.
Well, it's been a short summer for us because we were going through till about. It was really only
we've only had 3 weeks break.
Really, it hasn't been that long.
It does feel like a long time.
Because we recorded a couple of episodes in advance because I was getting married. They rolled out, and then we kind of took a few weeks because TR was starting the new job and a couple of things happened.
When was the last one again?
It came out the week. I think it was. Was it Dave or no? Rob Frid.
Rob Frid. Yeah, 27th.
But it was still late July. But we recorded before I got married on the 13th, and we recorded it before I got married. So we haven't recorded since the second week of July, first or second week of July. So, it's now the end of August. We're recording this on the 23rd. So if there's any big signings that happen between when you're listening to this and when we're talking about it, sorry we didn't talk about it sooner.
Exactly 3 things happened in the hockey world since we were gone.
I think 4 if you count the little chicklets bump TR's books got. Anybody listening to this also is probably aware that TR hit Spit and Chicklets this past week. Biz was down. Biz and Granelli came down. That was around the same time we recorded our last bit of stuff, and all that stuff dropped this week, and it was great. I've watched the first Road Warriors. I listened to the episode. You did it was great, man.
Oh yeah, thanks. It was I actually cringed at the first Road Warriors. I don't know what it was, man. I called Danielle. I was like, I'm fucked. I said, I'm going to get fired. I said, I'm done hockey. I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was I just smoked a joint. I don't know if it was the time of day I watched it. I thought I looked like a total asshole. But I keep looking at YouTube, and boom, it's getting all these unbelievable, 5,000 thumbs up and 45 down. So I said, okay. And I even texted Biz about it. And he got back to me. He's like, oh, relax. It's all right. He said, I'm doing my shtick, but people will like it, and sure enough, they did. So maybe it was me being paranoid. But I love the interview on the Chicklets interview that we did from the basement. And by the way, I've been getting lots of good feedback. I often do public speaking in various forms, and I don't say that enough. So if anybody out there wants me for that, contact me, send me a message on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, whatever it might be. Email tryan91@hotmail.com. But anyway, that really helped, so I can't thank the boys enough for that because I've been getting more gigs since. Now, episode 2 of Road Warriors is going to feature more of that. So again,
that just dropped. I watched 3 minutes of it before you walked in.
Okay, I haven't seen it.
It just dropped late this afternoon. I tried to watch it earlier and it wasn't up yet, and then I checked again just as you were walking in the door. So
okay, good.
It is up now. So
after I watched or listened to the senior stuff, I forgot to mention when he was here. Has he ever heard of the band Spoon?
Yeah, Senior. only a couple of songs.
I feel that Senior would love the record "Ga Ga Ga Ga" by Spoon.
Maybe. You know what? Remind me of that after this.
I will.
Send it over.
Yeah.
One of the boys brought in a Spoon CD. God, it was a couple of years ago.
It's probably Hot Thoughts, the latest one. Yeah,
maybe it was. And they were right into it, and it kind of went by the wayside. Remember anything though? You give him something new, he'll digest that all.
Yeah,
well,
I recall when he was singing in that one, I was like, Senior kind of digs the wall of sound stuff, and there's a lot of moments on this record that I think he'd chew up.
Good. Okay. Well, I'll check that out too. I know a couple songs. That's it. I'll go full albums. Since I love doing that, I've been immersing myself lately. I just listen to every single. I like the Sheepdogs already. Now I love them. Yeah. I listen to every album. I know it's a lot of the same sound. Would be the only knock. But
what a band to party to.
Man,
I've seen the Sheepdogs. I've gone to 4 Sheepdogs concerts. I've seen the Sheepdogs.
I still haven't seen them.
I've seen the Sheepdogs 1.5 times. I've gone to 4 concerts. So I'll let you piece that.
That's like me. That was like me with the Arkells this summer, man. They played George Street for Canada Day, and I was like passed out in the corner of confusion and left before they were fucking done. I was just day drinking at Chuck's all day and just got polluted. It was a bad scene.
I tell you, that was nuts for me. So I just got another. Well, I didn't say another, add to the list, I guess. I got a consistent job at Mill Street Brewery downtown St. John's. So that falls under the Labatt umbrella.
Okay.
So Labatt sponsored the George Street Fest. So all the bosses were here from Mill Street and Labatt, from everywhere. I say all the bosses. I mean, that's a really easy way to put it. But just a lot of people that work at Mill Street or Labatt's from all over Canada were there. So we were at every event, and I realized the hardest part of this job is going to be managing the buzz. Yeah. Because, I love going to George Street and everything, but I also love the next day when I don't really want to go out. I'll have an omelet and watch 4 movies in a row. Yeah. None of that. No. And not only is there none of that, it's like, you're up at 8 and you're going back in, so you're like, oh, okay. Maybe don't call for shooters at 6:30 p.m. But I found the same thing. I was watching Randy Bachman. Well, my head was going through. I couldn't believe it. I'm watching Randy Bachman going, I know this is great, but my head is beaten. Like, it's hurting.
Well, I mean, in the same amount of time you've been working at the brewery, I also built myself a fucking tiki bar, and so I've just been drinking a pile of rum in the backyard, and it's been wonderful.
Rum too.
Oh, it's been so good. I think I've gone through like 4 bottles of Screech in the last 3 weeks. Wow. It's great. It's the best.
I've just been reading. Like I've done.
Well, you got to step up your fucking summer game apparently.
No, well, there's a couple of sips here and there. I read mostly at breweries. So,
there you go.
But I spent most of the break just reading hockey book after hockey book after hockey book after. So I'm on book number 6 in August.
What's this one?
Book number 6 is Coach, about the Pat Burns story, and I'm probably going to finish that in the weekend. But anyway, I remember one of my friends, after I guess spending 2 days that weekend there, just reading for a couple hours, came over, and they sat down and they're like, "I've got a question to ask you," and I meant to ask this to Ron. They looked at me and said, "So do you think about hockey literally every day?" And the answer was no. I was like, I'm literally doing this to psych myself into it. We took a break in mid-July.
Who said that?
One of my friends that was at the when I was reading a book. They asked, "Do you think about hockey every single day?" And the answer was really no. I do take a bit of a break after the free agency stuff, but reading all these books were kind of an exercise to get back into this. So.
I think I do. I think even I think
they meant in the sense of the NHL. You play, so it's a little different.
I don't think about I don't dwell on the Bruins losing the cup every day, but I think about hockey in some way.
Okay,
I think about playing. I think about
Yeah, they meant in the sense of the NHL and pro hockey leagues and stuff like that. No. And no, really, I mean, like I said, I think 4 things have happened in the NHL in the 6 weeks that we took. Now. It is a slow summer, but
most of them have been.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Same.
I kind of am too. I mean, it's kind of been nice. Like I've been following baseball a little bit more this summer. I think it's that thing where working on this all that latter part of last year, like from January to June through the hockey season, had just generally gotten me more into not just hockey, but I think sports in general. And so it's just kind of led me to kind of enjoy baseball a little bit more this summer too.
It's definitely more into hockey. I think doing this last, I'm unbelievably excited to have this for a full season.
Yeah, it's going to be fun.
The second half of last year was like I was crushing at least the better part of 2 games a night when there was a lot of hockey on. So I can only imagine, stretching that out in an 82-game schedule.
Yeah.
I'm going to know so much about the Dallas Stars.
Yeah, well, I just look at it. I figure in a calendar year, there's going to be the same volume of news no matter what.
Yeah.
So if it's going to be slow, I'd rather it be in August than January.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
I kind of just put my heels in. But the thing is, for me, to me, I'm conditioned to look at this time as a break. Like,
well, yeah, you
know what I mean? Yeah, like this was the last of my, like, give me my August for fuck's sakes.
Especially
right?
you
When
had
I
the ball
leave
hockey
and-
stuff, and you had everything kind of building up.
Always.
Yeah.
So like my summers were for the boys, for sports, and I'd train and stuff. But you don't have to be thinking much about hockey when you're running Signal Hill. You're running. You're you know what the goal is, but I wasn't sitting there going, pitching my first shift, or I was working, doing what I had to do. But it's mentally and physically draining. I've always said it. And even people say, oh, yeah, but, you're in the NHL, you're famous. Yeah, that makes it more mentally and physically draining.
I say, you were a big advocate of different sports, multiple sports, and that's to take a mental break from hockey.
Totally. You're not getting a mental break walking down fucking St. Catherine Street in Montreal.
Every Tom, Dick, and Harry asking for a photo.
Yeah.
Especially the thing about how bad it's now with smartphones, too. There's a photo in the fucking palm of your hand all the time.
But that's why I would appreciate it back in the day.
Speaking of smartphones in your hands.
Speaking of smartphones. Hey, Mike, you'd never say you got a tiki bar out there now.
I know, right?
Look at his shirt.
I know.
All of a sudden, he's Magnum PI.
Well, the shirt, I've had the shirt for a while. I just didn't wear it as frequently, but I'm going right out on that deck as soon as we are done here.
Yeah, of course you are. Like I would too. But I've always, as a player and everything, you look at this time like it's a job, hockey. I always loved it. I mean, it's great to go to work and something that you love to do. I mean, I was never in the morning going, oh, fuck, I got to go to the Bell Center or even in Tri-City, wherever, Toyota Center. I was never looking at it like that. But it is break time, man. It is break time. And it's when you're up that high, especially now with the social media and everything. I know that looks fun, but I think it got worse. You used to be able to escape in Montreal, like, during the season. Like, if you really wanted, you could find a bar or a restaurant or a town, then people aren't going to really say much. But now it's just every single minute of every day you're on. I'd be vacationing to like fucking Papua New Guinea now. I'd be going to places that no one had any idea.
It's a great joke about that. In the height of Seinfeld, the character Uncle Leo couldn't go anywhere in North America without people doing hello to him. Uncle Leo, hello. And he said he was at the Wailing Wall. He was at the Wailing Wall, and someone turns him around. It's a very sacred place. Someone turns him around and gives him the Uncle Leo hello. He's like, that's the moment I knew there's no coming back from this.
Yeah.
He's like, that's the moment I knew there was no escape.
Well, I mean, speaking of being in the public eye and all that kind of stuff, TR's got a little bit of news here that we're pretty excited. I'm pretty excited about. But you got a little something coming up next week?
Oh, next week, yes. So, I'm on Letterkenny, and I don't want to explain what it was. It's tailor-made done, but I got a message on my Instagram, and it was actually from Tom Power of CBC. It was a great guy. I don't know him that well. I worked with his brother Brian.
Good guy.
Yeah, I don't. He seems like, I mean, I don't want to say spoken. We messaged each other. We've spoken a couple times, but on Instagram and stuff. And he sent me a message and said, I was just with some people from Letterkenny, and I'd be just surprised if you don't get a call. So I didn't really know much about it, but I didn't really know what he meant. But I am in the acting union, and there's a couple of scenes there that they needed a Newfoundlander, helped if you played hockey, sort of thing. I won't get any further into it than that, but so
I can't believe I didn't get a fucking call, but whatever.
Well,
they know I can't skate. I think they already know I can't skate.
Well, again, maybe there's no skating in it. I haven't revealed that yet. Yeah. So I sent in a video audition. I did it with my buddies Scotty Bray and Zach O'Brien. They're the Growlers. Fans will know it. Zach did the video. Scotty went over the lines with me. And sure enough, they got back to me a week later and said, you're going to Sudbury, if you want, at the end of August. So this Thursday coming, I fly into a couple days of Letterkenny in Sudbury. And then I'm going to hit Toronto on the way back Saturday and Sunday and go to the Mill Street, I'm going to say headquarters, but the first Mill Street was in Ontario. I'm going to go to that one and meet some of the people that I'll be working for and hit a Jays game as well. It's a great networking opportunity there, as well as hanging out outdoors. And my book, as long as you're talking exciting news, so a lot of people might know listening to this now, but Spittin' Chicklets came and they featured me last week and my dad this week coming. Or this week now, and we did Road Warriors volumes 1 and 2 for Biz Nasty and YouTube. So that's getting a lot of clicks. It's getting a lot of views. It's getting a lot of listens. And my book, 5 years later, is back on number 1. I'm sure it's just for today because of the Spittin' Chicklets bump, but it's number 1 sports and rec book in Canada at the moment, which is wild. You know, but when I say that, this is not a big wheel. You know, that means it sold, you know, a few hundred copies today, maybe a little bit more, and I get 50 cents a book, so I'm not trying to be a big fucking wheel here. It's a nice thing to happen. I got actually Tyler Morrison, a great comedian from Ontario. He called and he's booked me 2 gigs in November in Muskoka. So actually, it does lead to I guess monetary and relationship adventures, but. Beyond that, it was just nice for them to do a little bit, and they spoke about us on Spittin' Chicklets there. You guys heard a little bit.
Well, you spoke about us. I appreciate it. It was really nice to...
Well, he opened that door, and it was great.
That was very nice. I'll tell the people from my Facebook messaging and my Twitter DMs, no, I do not know Biz Nasty, and no, I cannot give you his cell phone number.
Yeah, I know.
For the last time.
No one's bothered me, so, you know.
Now you're getting a hint at the emails and texts I told you guys about.
Yeah.
Well, nobody asked me for Jason Momoa's underwear. So.
No, but how many times people even I get asked for Biz's number now, like 5-10 times
I got
a day.
asked for it.
Yeah, imagine.
Chuck, I mean, it's only been like an hour, and Chuck's already been like trying to sneak a peek at my phone to get Ron's phone number now. So like, he's just gonna.
Here's the fun one for if you ever cross paths with Biz again. When he first had his I don't know if he still does it. But when he first got his Twitter in the NHL, and I always wanted to ask him about this. When he first got his Twitter in the NHL, a lot of people would shit talk him, saying, "Oh, you're spending too much time on Twitter and not enough time on the ice." You know, assholes that they do. So he challenged them to go work out in a gym with him. He'd he'd literally be like, "Here, I'm going to the gym at this day, and if you think I'm so good at what I need to do to get on the ice or be better on the ice, I'm going to be at this gym at this time." And I want to know if anyone ever called him on it. I want to know if anyone ever showed up and tried to work out.
Well, we're going to have him on here
that
soon.
Fascinated me. And and that would be the one question, like, did anyone ever do it? Because the dude is he was one of the first guys in the BioSteel sports camps and all that stuff. So the dude is a physical wonder. So I always wondered.
Biz plays it down too. He was a better hockey player than he lets on. Biz was on Team Canada as a D-man.
Yeah,
Captain of Saginaw. Drafted as a D-man.
Yeah,
and
way better than he lets on.
I think it's just that thing of like he put fourth line plug in his Twitter bio and has just been like self-deprecating and playing that up as kind of the persona.
It's almost like Don Cherry when we get talking in this interview. It's a bit more of a character than the person he is type of thing.
But he'll be on where him and Grinnell have both agreed to do it. Mike Grinnell, producer, editor, all that of amongst other things.
Yeah.
He's in every jack of all trades on that show. They all take on a lot, but the boys are definitely going to come on, and as is Tara Sloan. Mm-hmm. So we do have some great guests coming up. I mean, we're once a week, so that takes us into late October, November. Just for the people out here who are wondering, because I often get asked who the guests are going to be. I don't always like to reveal it, but I'm starting to think the other way. You can't hurt.
Oh yeah,
I like the idea of saying.
Yeah,
I'm as somebody who is the person who winds up having to edit the episodes and then upload them. I'm a big fan of until it's edited and exported. I don't like saying who's going to be this week. I'm cool saying we have this person coming up in the general sometime in the future, but we've had issues where we've literally been sat down here recording and then phone number fell through and we don't have that guest for this week now and we have to do something else or whatever. So
that stressed me out that day. Who was that? Or that
Andre
was Andre
Waugh.
Waugh. But in the end,
don't throw him under the bus.
In the end, you just say,
We'll have Andre on again. But
I was all worked up about that too, and I had to tell people. And in the end, it wasn't that big of a deal. I just said, we'll have another time.
No, it wasn't a big deal at all.
I'm always worried of being a jinx. All my friends last night were like, "Oh my God, you're starting up again. Who is it? Who is it? Who is it? Who is it? Who is it?" And I was like, "Not saying." And all I'd say is like, "It's big though." Like it's and that's all I'd say.
You're right though.
Not saying it's big.
If we could, I'm definitely kind of cool with because originally what we had started doing when we first did our first couple episodes, we were announcing who the guest was a few days in advance, and we kind of got out of that just because of the scheduling, how tight things were getting and stuff like that. But I'd be cool to go back to that because I think it helps bring up, and I mean, people might even tell us, like, if we talk about it on Twitter a couple of days before, then people are watching out for it a little bit more Tuesday morning, maybe. And that might be the thing. And people can probably tell us on Twitter or Instagram or wherever if they actually think that would work or if it's better for us that way. So,
it's not a major problem.
We've started meeting minutes here. While we're talking about this, can we still get Jeff Merrick?
No, point of order. No, it's not.
And and what else is there to talk about right now? Anything?
I mean, there's Kuznetsov just got suspended for 4 years from international play for testing positive for coke.
IIHF,
got it was that weird thing
where
where
they test him
at the World Championships, because during the World Championships, that video dropped where he was seen in a video with a couple lines of white powder on a table in front of him. So they tested him at the World Championships, came back positive. He's been suspended for 4 years from playing international hockey for Russia. NHL has come out and said, we're reviewing it. He's going to have a sit-down meeting with Bettman. We're going to decide what we do from there.
Personally, I don't think he should be suspended from the NHL.
No,
I don't think he's going to be. I don't think he should be. I think that...
Well, why would he be?
Yeah,
if there's been 8 million come before him, then, you know what I mean? I don't want to say that, but there's been 500.
Oh,
I
definitely.
can tell you about. I can tell you some of my buddies. They went to substance abuse. They came out of it. They're fine. Whatever it might be. I don't want to sum it up just like that.
That was in the NHL. So
yeah,
Bill Daly made the statement, and I am.
By the way, wait. When I just said it's a problem, because I don't mean it's a problem in the NHL. It's like anything. Trust me, I've been there. It's like any realm of society. It's like your students. It's like your rec hockey team. It's like a choir club. It's like whatever. Like there's a few. Obviously, they might do it a little bit. I'm not defending the art of doing cocaine. What I'm defending is that there's levels. There's a process in place in the NHL, and the number one thing is to help the person that needs the help.
Yeah.
Right. Banning someone for 4 years isn't going to get you anywhere. It's going to make him, if that was all he had, it'd make him fucking do it more. Anyway.
And so Bill Daly is the guy that made the statement, and I very, very much said we're going to have a sit down with Evgeny. He's reached out, so they did say he's reached out for substance abuse counseling, and they've just made it aware of the things that they offer. Now the NHL has been kind of afraid of, and especially in the smartphone era and stuff like that, of the the recreational drug boogeyman, because these guys are looked up to by kids and all of that political aspect of it.
That's why you help them.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. I think 10 years ago we don't get that statement. I think 10 years ago he gets the book thrown at him, and it's not really a discussion of what happens behind the scenes. I think for one of my favorite things that I think I've heard anyone say about the NHL is Bob McKenzie said the NHL is no different than society. If you have 30,000 people in a society, you're going to have the same problems as 3,000 NHLers as you would 3,000 people in a room. So obviously, yes, if you put 3,000 people in a room right now in 2019 and they're all in their mid-20s, some of them are going to be using recreational drugs.
Like, I don't think it has been like that for a while, though. Like, I remember 20 years ago it being the same. I remember people going and reporting it and they got help. They didn't get suspended.
And I think
when are we talking about? Is this a big overture from last year or overturning?
I think the biggest thing I know 3 or 4 years ago, and it might have been longer than that. You can look it up. It was during the Dion Phaneuf era of the Toronto Maple Leafs. The league. The Leafs went to the league. They were concerned about there being a drug problem on the Toronto Maple Leafs. So instead of going to the league, they went to the OPP. And this was in January or February of a Leaf season. And then, of course,
So they were mathematically eliminated from the playoffs at that point.
When was this?
This was, I think, 7 or 8 years ago. I'll share the link on Twitter. But anyway, obviously, they went to the OPP, and the story got leaked, and there was a shitstorm like you would not on social medias and news, and the thing just grew fucking legs because they were concerned. Since then, a lot of things have happened. a couple of people did get caught with it, and Donald Fair, as the NHLPA guy, has taken I won't say a stance, but a proactive turn in saying, hey guys, if this is something you have a problem with, we're going to work with the NHL so that, one, obviously your privacy is protected, and two, you have a problem, you get help for that problem. Not, Jesus, you're a criminal, get out of here.
Yeah.
And I think the bigger thing that we got to think about here is, in terms of the NHL's response, is just that this was IIHF testing. Yeah. Like, this wasn't the NHL did a test on the guy and he came back positive, so they have to do whatever. This was a different organization that's autonomous of the NHL, has nothing to do, doesn't really have anything to do with them, who ran tests in May or June. Yeah. Those tests came back positive for a substance that generally, like, if you're a casual user, it only stays in your system for like 2 to 4 days, I think. It's max 2 weeks if you're chronic and just cut it off. So, like, even if the NHL was to step in now, it's not like he's going to test. Chances are he's not going to test positive for it at this point. So really, does the NHL have any obligation or onus to react based on another organization's findings?
That's fair.
No. The NHL doesn't really.
The NHLPA would probably have an argument to lose their fucking minds.
I would think the team, if I'm the team, I go to them. Again, people are, I'm not sticking up for people that, look, you know what? Drugs are drugs, though. It's everywhere. You want me to tell you something? I would bet that I would bet all, but I'd say, let's say there's 2 teams. Half of those, 16 of those teams, that more than one person on that team did coke last year. Now, not everybody has a problem. They might have gone, again, I'm not putting myself here. And when I played, honestly, I'll tell you, I've tried many drugs in my life. When I played hockey, I didn't. I didn't do any of that. So anybody who thinks, he's a wingnut because he was on coke, no. Largely because I was ignorant. There was guys on my team doing it. I've read in books since. I didn't know fucking idea. Now I know where they were going. I had no idea. But it did happen. I found out after, and then I played in the minors a few more years, and then I played senior hockey, and guys are coming back and everything, and then I got into broadcast. Whatever you're going to say, I have my finger on the pulse, and I know that not everybody who does it is a problem, first of all. But you get a bunch of people that you're giving all this money to, then the odd time they're going to find themselves with beautiful women or with drugs or at 2 or 3 in the morning, and they might not do it again for 2 months. A lot of them don't have a problem. So now what do? You got to say, fuck, like, I don't really know what to do here. Yeah, okay, coach, I did. Sorry. Don't do it anymore. Okay. Not everybody, again, is documented like a Nathan Parrott, who's documented and went and got help and came back into the NHL, or a Theo Fleury or a Bob Probert. Again, that was going across the border. Yeah. That probably would have kept going. Now Bob Probert needed help. A lot of people need help. But if you're going to start worrying about every little drug that goes in and out, I'm not saying it's great to do. I don't want to hear any of my players, if I'm a GM, are doing any drugs. But I guarantee you, first of all, they're smoking weed. Do we even consider that a drug anymore? It's legal. But there could be Molly, Coke. I would be surprised at heroin, but, not too surprised. I mean, I've never seen it done in my life by anybody. But, again, these are people from all over. Yes, we're hockey players, but you're from all over the world. You're from, who knows where you grew up, who knows what you saw, who knows what your dad did, who knows what your friends did.
It's a society, and it's going to have the same things as a normal society.
If you give a fucking 18-year-old or even a 25-year-old, whatever it might be, point being young, millions of dollars and status and power, the odd time they're going to do coke. But that's what happens, guys. The people find themselves in that position, and they hunt it down. And you know what? That's just like anything else. It's like the people that don't work hard enough. It's like people that booze. They don't all have problems, but they'll find their way out of the NHL. Oh, yeah. You don't see a guy playing in the NHL for 13, 14 years that has those habits, right? You're going to see them, and they'll fall off. They're going to play 3 years. Now, who gives a fuck? Go back to the mill and work now. Was it worth that much?
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Well, I was
I'm not surprised, at that it happens. I hate to say it blatantly, but people go out and do that. And, to each their own. You want to stay away from it. You want to stay in the show, then stay away from it. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I just watched, like, last week, I was watching the Doc Ellis documentary.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
Which is, but they buy stock about the fact that, like, in the 70s, like, in the late 60s through 70s and much later, kind of everybody was doing greenies. It was just a thing in baseball. Like, everybody took speed. Like, it was just kind of what you did. And it was one of those things where everybody kind of thought, and I mean, during the Ron interview, we get into, like, we kind of go off on a weird Barry Bonds tangent and stuff, but it was that sort of thing where it was like, it was kind of okay. Everybody kind of considered it okay at the time because no one considered it an upper hand because everybody was doing it. It was a level playing field because everybody was taking them because nobody really understood at the time, like at that point, really, like no one really understood those long-term effects of it and stuff. But it was just one of those, like everybody just did it.
I love the player that describes greenies as there's like 60 to 70 really good cups of coffee.
Have you watched that, by the way?
Yeah, I watched it.
It's so
the
good.
day it came out.
It's so good.
Outside of that one, clearly it might have helped him. I remember him saying, and by the way, he got a no-hitter, but he walked like 8 guys.
It was the sloppiest no-hitter in history.
I think the timing was great. I think it was a lot of fluke. Meaning, the ball got hit in the right places because people were tattooing the ball, and he hit, and like I said, he had 7 walks and a hit batsman, I think, or if not 2. But to me, if it doesn't enhance you, I know people would say, well, cocaine enhances. Not in this sense.
That was in the NHL statement. They do not consider it a performance-enhancing drug. It's a recreational drug.
Right? Yeah. Because people they're not getting caught because they're doing it because they want to be like, take longer shifts.
Yeah.
What's happening is that they're partying and using it to party, and then they'll probably, test positive. But anything that doesn't have, like, again, if it's steroids, I totally see it.
Yeah.
Why? Without getting all the way into that argument, I can see, rather than, because we get into the Barry Bonds and the Mark McGuire and everything, and I got my stance on that, but without getting into that argument, whether you're supported or you don't, I'm just saying
it's going to happen.
Yeah, and those things, well, but it's going to happen. But what I'm saying is that steroids definitely help Barry Bonds hit home runs. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
I don't think the way they're catching these guys do coke or weed or LSD or any of that, anybody's meaning it to help them. You're getting a needle in your ass.
Yeah.
Ball starts flying over the fence easier. Again, put 2 and 2 together. But and again, I'm still not I'm not getting into that whole should the records be that's a whole. Should they stand up against the old guys and everything? We
don't have enough time in a day to get. No,
we don't. And I'm just saying, that steroids, to me, if you're doing them, it's probably going to enhance you a little bit.
Yeah.
Whatever the crime is, make it universal, and everybody knows. But if it's again doing fucking blow at a hip concert or fucking I'm saying that because years ago Bob Probert loved the hip and he did, or if it was LSD. Doc Ellis included, you probably have to assume they're not doing it to fucking enhance their game.
Yeah. Well, Doc, my favorite story from and not to again go off on too much of a tangent, but my favorite story from that whole thing is like he has he has an off day, so he goes in and he goes to his buddy's place in LA because they're playing in San Diego. He goes and he parties and he gets woken up on like a pool, like a beach chair by the pool, and like his buddy's girlfriend's waking up. He's like, Doc, you got to pitch today? He's like, no, I got to pitch tomorrow. She's like, he's got to pitch. I don't pitch till Wednesday tomorrow. She's like, no, today is Wednesday. And he's like, well, what happened to yesterday?
And then the guy says, yeah, you got to pitch for the Pirates tonight. I love that quote. I'm like, who the fuck else would he be pitching for? Dude, you got to pitch for the Pirates tonight. What?
and how repeatedly
what happened to yesterday?
Yeah, what happened to yesterday? Because in the immortal words of Doc Ellis, he was high as a Georgia pine, and that's like his go-to describing how high he was as high as a Georgia pine.
Mark that down. That might be a good T-shirt. What happened to yesterday?
Yeah, what happened to yesterday?
Anyway, and without beating this to oblivion like a dead horse, I think we've done that. Let's move on.
So the only other thing that I can think has happened is with the absence of Mitch Marner signing. Still hasn't happened. No Mitch Marner.
I'll just. Do you want me to refresh?
No.
Well, no. But apparently, of Terry's monotone, I really don't.
He's trending. He's trending. Do you want me to?
Is it?
No,
he's going to be trending forever.
Any hockey fan for the last 2 weeks that I run into is like, there's not much happening in hockey, but Marner's something. Let's talk about Marner. I just heard every. Hey, go ahead, give me your 2 bits. People listen to this for that reason.
Yeah, fair enough. I do think that I did read from. So I've got like 2 people that have you ever seen The Big Lebowski? It's Jackie Treehorn carries a lot of water in these parts, Mr. Lebowski, and you don't carry shit. So a lot of people right now don't carry shit, in my opinion. But Elliot Friedman, Chris Johnson, they carry a lot of water in these parts. These parts being what I take for hockey news. They said they're closer than what people think on a 3-year deal in the 9 window. So maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't. But seeing that in the last, both of them said it within a couple hours of each other yesterday, makes me think that by the time people are listening to this, it wouldn't be the fucking craziest thing in the world to think this is all behind us. Also,
and let's hope it is, so we don't have to fucking talk about it anymore.
Yeah.
You know what? The only thing I have to say, Mike, do you want to give your 2 bits
On the Marner thing?
Yeah.
No, I couldn't really give
It's all been done.
I don't have 2 bits to give. I
Quote
really
the
don't
Bare
care.
Naked Ladies. Woohoo! It's all been done.
Yes. I like how you added woohoo to that.
Yeah, that was good. You didn't.
Completely
not
unnecessary,
a lot of people would have added the woohoo to that quote,
Yeah,
but our
just like-
Chucky. Oh
Yeah.
boy.
So here's what I think. I can't believe that in today's day and age, the 2 players, I don't know, if I could ever find myself in a similar situation, it was in junior with Damon Lankow. I went 8th, he went 5th. So on that team, for example, there was a lot of people expecting both of us to hog the spotlight, right? If it was the NHL, you'd have an argument because I was bigger. I was, I don't want to say tougher. I fought tougher guys. Lanks was a better skater, better centerman. Why he went 5th? I mean, he's a better player than me. But I'm just saying, if all the, I'm trying to relate something in my own life. Because everybody can say, well, I'd take less money. But I guarantee you that even Matthews, I can't believe Matthews and Marner didn't sit down alone last summer and talk this out, what they were each going to get. It's a sign of the times, I guess. But to me, teammate, none of this would have happened because I would have looked at the other guys on the team. You know, again, if I'm Matthews or if I'm Marner, probably they're the 2 big guns that are up to sign right this year for Toronto. Just like Crosby and Malkin. You think they had a conversation about it? Probably.
They did actually.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
did.
yeah.
Look at their contracts. Do I need to say anything else? People act like I'm old school. These guys are still playing in the league, right? They're still 2 of the fucking top players there are. And they did it. Paul Curry and Teemu Selanne did it for Colorado years ago.
There's a fun story about that. And I won't say anyone's names. It's very easily researchable of a defensive core of the Ottawa Senators. So they had the rumor has it's never been confirmed by either dude, but a lot of people say they had the conversation together. And then one guy wanted to make more money than the other, so he went in and said. So one guy gave a number, and he said, "Well, I know for a fact that you can get him for knock $1.5 million off the number." They kept one guy, the other guy went elsewhere. But they did have the conversation type of thing before that. This is, the 2 players never came out pointing fingers at one another, but they went in and they had a conversation before going into the negotiations.
Yeah, well, sorry, I was misquoted then.
Yeah.
I didn't mean you have a conversation about going that way with it.
Oh,
I
okay.
meant the other way with it. Yeah, I meant the other way. Like, if you're trying to save a team, if you're trying to fall in under the cap, I don't know, Taves Kane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get what you're talking about. You're saying like the 2 guys, like last
two or
summer.
three
I was only using the example because
I
it
know.
has backfired once.
Yeah.
That's interesting. What you said was very relevant. I just didn't want myself to be What I'm saying is that there's always going to be Letang was probably in on the conversation. Like I would take me if I'm on one of those teams and I'm a big gun, I'm an assistant captain, a captain, leading scorer, whatever the fuck you want to say. I'm an important piece of that puzzle, and I'm up for a contract. I would look at all. To me, the first would be saving the team. And if I'm Mitch Marner, it's easy to put it all on Marner though, because he's here now, because he's last. But if I'm both of those guys, I go, fuck, we won a cup here, don't we? Like, we just started this boat. Like, what's the difference if I get 11.5 or 10.7? I'm fucking 20 years fucking old.
One thing I am going to say, and this is the one thing that Mitch himself, and I don't know if there's any truth to it or whatever, but he's always constantly said, and it does make sense with the way the NHL climate is today. He says, my agent is handling all that. My agent is handling all that. He might not even be in the room. He might have just said, this is the lowest number I'm going to settle on. And his agent says, we're fucking not.
I know, but that's
there.
when you'd step in.
And
I stepped in.
This is what Chris Johnson said.
Right.
He said, this is the first time, not Chris Johnson, sorry, Elliot Friedman said, the player is now frustrated. The last time this happened, Steven Stamkos signed a deal outside of his ELC, his first contract outside of his ELC. He got frustrated. It was getting close to camp, and he said, you know what? I'll do it myself. And he negotiated his own contract and then changed agencies. I don't think that it's going to get this nuclear with the Marner thing, but if I were to make a prediction that this does go into camp, he will show up at Leafs camp and play his own insurance premium just to say, you know what, guys, this is an agency thing. I am still a member of this team. I'm definitely not after the fucking...
I don't always
You're
buy
just
that
saying
shit,
that because
though.
Leafs camp's here and you want him to show up.
No.
I still don't buy all that shit. What I'm saying, I get it. That's a sign of the times. I get what you're saying.
Yeah,
it makes sense. Right? But I just can't believe we get to that. You still got two fucking... I don't care. Yes, it's a day of the agents. I had Wayne Gretzky's fucking agent. I know people are going to say, who the fuck do you think you are? But I did. And you know what? I was offered... Reggie, I didn't go back to Montreal. It's not that they didn't want me. They offered me a fucking contract to go back. I didn't like my situation. I took 50 Canadian. I would have made 125 US. Now, again, I didn't play another NHL game, so this is good money to me. They offered me 125 US to play on their minor league team in Quebec Citadels that year. For a brief time, they were Quebec. I said, no fucking way. I want a chance to play. I took 50 Canadian here. So I guess that's not really a team thing. That's just personal. But point being, like, I can step in on Wayne Gretzky's agent. Anybody can step in. If I was in a fucking dressing room and I was Aston Matthews and Mitch Marner, by the way, I love both players. I'm getting fired up, but there's nothing against them. It's more of the time. But I would sit down. We don't need, okay, I know we got agents. I know it's an agency thing, but that's too easy of a fucking answer. I'm sitting here, Austin, and you're sitting there. We're both going to get around 10 million. How about we take 10? How about we both take 10 million for the next 3 years? Is that a bad thing? And then we'll sign a few other guys and we might win a Stanley Cup. That's my thinking.
I will say this, though, but back on that, we just had the conversation about these guys want to enjoy their August. So maybe it's something like that. Maybe I will step in if I have to. When I'm done enjoying my summer.
But again,
it's already done now.
That's the thing is, it's already done
for slightly more.
You're talking about like last summer when
I'm talking about the Mitch signing without or showing up to camp. Or that,
I get what you're saying because like last year when this same exact situation was happening with Nylander, like that's the point where if putting myself, which is not the same as you doing it because you were actually kind of close to being in the same situation, but like. If I'm Marner's and Matthews last season as all that's happening, I'm going, Jesus, we're both coming up on it. You know what? Let's figure it out so that this doesn't happen to us. And you know what? Okay, like you said, we're both probably going to sign for around 10. Let's both say 975 for 3 years, not 975 for 3 years, and then we can see what we can do.
Spend it in your life,
and then exactly
right,
and exactly,
and you're 20.
Exactly. Let's both say 975. Or both. We'll say 10. We'll say whatever it is. Yeah. We say what that number is. Maybe we take a cut so that we can get this guy in, and then the two of those guys become the fucking LeBrons of the team that are going out and saying we want this guy, and we took the hit so that you can get that guy now. Like that sort of thing is the position that me.
That's what I would want. That's what I would do.
Me as somebody who's never played above like a shitty beer league level of hockey. That's the way I would see building that team if I was considered a leader on it.
Before we get off this ramp, I will say this: there's a great story. It goes back a while ago, and I think Rob Rossi did the reporting, or it might have been Josh. I hope I'm saying this right, Yoey, of one of the Pittsburgh papers back when Evgeny Malkin signed after Sidney Crosby was already signed. Evgeny Malkin had the contract, but he couldn't get a hold of Sidney Crosby, and it was a higher cap hit than Crosby's, and everyone thought it would be a big deal. So he wouldn't sign the contract until he ran it by Sid because he was the captain. We're going back. I was living in St. John's, so it was at least 2010, but you can dig it up. It's one of the Pittsburgh papers, and it's a pretty good story. So stuff like that, obviously does happen.
And you know what? Leafs don't have a captain. Neither one of those guys wears a C for the Leafs. And maybe that's part of the question is
fucking unbelievable.
The leadership
should have that on.
The leadership,
it's fucking unbelievable.
If those guys aren't doing that sort of scenario and aren't doing that, maybe that's why they're not considered that leadership core with them. You never know.
I think it should be Morgan Riley, Tavares.
We're not talking about the Leafs. I didn't mean to even bring it up. Here's what we're gonna do because I'm really dying.
The last thing I'll say.
No.
That, by the way, that does happen. You just don't hear about it because it doesn't make the papers.
Yeah.
Often, if you took all those teams, there are all kinds of top guys that love being with. It's just the Stamkos will get, and then the Marner that will get a lot of attention. But as I sit here fuming, I'm not. It's more of a. And by the way, I cut you off there, and I'm sorry.
No worries.
As I sit here and I'm fuming, it's nothing. Mitch Marner is one of the greatest players I've ever seen. I watched him at the Memorial Cup in Red Deer. He was the best junior player I've ever seen in my life. Dave Roper is the equipment manager for Mount Pearl. He tells me that both guys are absolute salt of the earth. It's more a culture thing, but you could step in, and I know they still might be great guys, but I think they missed the boat on that, and I don't know if they're I don't know if they're old school team guys. That's all. I don't have any.
I don't think anybody is anymore.
No,
like the concept of the company man, it disappeared 20 years ago.
Yeah,
and whether it's hockey or whether it's anything, I just don't think anybody kind of has that same level of employer loyalty that they had up to and has like been romanticized throughout the latter part.
Employer is one thing though. Team.
No, I know, but I'm just saying in general. Like there was a point where people were like, "Oh, I work for this company. I'm putting in 25 years for them. I'm getting a gold watch, and then I'm retiring." But I mean,
don't get me wrong. Every summer I came home, I robbed gloves, pants, fucking sticks, everything. I took whatever I could home from the Montreal Canadiens.
But I'm saying
the employer.
Oh no, but I'm saying in general.
30 Gatorade bottles.
What I'm trying to say is that in general, there was a time, and I mean it's a different kind of economy now. People work differently, all those things. But the same thing is true for the NHL. You don't have these guys doing that kind of long-term one-team thing. It doesn't really happen the same way anymore.
Again,
other than Sid,
why do you think I love
really untouchable.
I'm going to say this. I'm jumping in here. I'm going to jump in. I'm going to jump in here.
I think Taves. I don't think Kane.
I think Joe Thornton. So I'm gonna say this. I think Joe Thornton will come back and stay as a San Jose Shark. Obviously, he hasn't spent his whole career there, being from Boston and all that stuff. But I don't think. Listen, I'm telling you now. I think there's gonna be a year where Sidney Crosby plays, and it's not the Pittsburgh Penguins. There's gonna be a year where maybe the Blackhawks have to trade one of Taser Kane. Joe Pavelski.
So did Wayne Gretzky. I don't think that is relevant to the conversation.
I think the Joe Pavelski leaving a free agency. I think the idea of a franchise player, a guy who gets drafted, spends his whole career there as the star, I think that's a part of yesteryear.
Tell me where it was in yesteryear, though.
But that's what I'm trying to say.
I want to know, guys. Tell me where it was in yesteryear. You're acting like everybody did that. Who?
Joe Sakic with the Nordiques, aka the Avalanche.
Me less than 10. You can't even say Ray Bourque or Wayne Gretzky.
Mario Lemieux.
Yeah, Lemieux. He was the first one popped into my head, and Yzerman. Now keep going.
Richard. Well, Richard's going back 100 years.
It's going back 50 years, but it's still making my point.
Maybe when there's 6 teams, though. Not when there's 6 teams. Take that out. I'm saying when there's 21 to what we got now.
Okay.
It's the same amount, right? Malkin, Crosby, okay. Lemieux, Yzerman. Right, you take all great, but Phil Esposito. Take it.
Yeah. Esposito played a couple,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like a lot.
New York,
it
Boston,
happened before, but not like
Chicago.
Not a shitload. Not everybody.
Yeah.
Right. Ray Bourque even left.
I think all the point I was just trying to make was that it was kind of what you came back to regarding the drugs thing, is that it's the same as society, and it's just a sample size. And my whole point was just like that kind of employer loyalty that I was talking about, like the company man mentality has kind of gone away in the last 20 years, and I think you're seeing more like this. This is something I don't know. I don't know if we brought this up. I think,
and Zach Koivu even played a season somewhere else, didn't it?
Brett Hull, Adam
Hall moved around a lot. Hall moved around a lot more people.
Luke Robitaille, name people from that era. It's the same ratio. What's his name? Dylan Larkin. That was the captain. He's been there the whole time. But they exist. They existed back then. But
when you watch a player get interviewed after a game, they're not wearing their team's ball cap anymore. They are wearing their personal logo that they've had somebody, some marketing firm design. A bunch are. Most of like the a lot of those guys are, and you're seeing it more and more. And it's something that you wouldn't even have been probably allowed to do 15 years ago.
I would say it's likely you weren't allowed to. I'd say it's likely CBA.
Well, when I played on the Habs, Shane Corson and Darcy Tucker had a company called Cool Sports, Kewl, and they wore that every day, and so did I for them.
Oh yeah, I know Cool Sports.
It was at least that long ago, boys.
Yeah, but I'm talking about like David Pasternak wearing like a DP 88 hat.
Speaking of this,
not like a company that you happen to own. I'm talking about like your fucking name.
And by the way, before we get onto your question, you're talking about people moving. Look at Paul Coffey. He's one of the best D ever. He played on 12 fucking teams.
Oh yeah, he was everywhere.
He's a fucking suitcase.
It's all a facade. I think it was always going to be traded for different reasons now. Now, a lot of them, Esa Tikkanen, Brian Noonan, when Messier went to the Rangers, a lot of the ex-Oilers wanted to go there because it wasn't all money, but I want to win a cup. I want to go with my boys. I think that society's more self-centered now, and you see it happening for different reasons, but it always happened.
I mean, look at the mutiny over Gordie Howe when he left, when he retired and then came back. When he came back to play with the Astros, is it Astros?
Yeah,
Arrows. Yeah.
Did you know, I learned over the weekend that there was a point in time where the Leafs were trying to shop Wendell Clark for Shane Corson and prospects.
No, but I can totally see that.
Yeah, no, it was.
I don't think Corse was as much of an impact straight up, but Wendell was hurt right away.
Wendell was.
He was always hurt.
There was a 5-year window, and I had no idea until I read a couple of books this year that. Jesus, man, the Toronto media that, everyone says they chased Phil Kessel away, they were brutal against Clark in the early 90s when he was hurt all the time. They were accusing him of faking it. They were, oh my God.
And remember, Corson, well, let's say they did make a trade in the late 80s or the early 90s. Corson, again, was still going. I remember playing with him in 97, 98. He was on the Olympic team in Nagano at least. So... But Clark was done by then. I mean, he was still playing maybe on the Islanders, but so there was some truth to the the idea of that trade being Corson. I'm sure it was longevity. Not that Corson's a bad player, but Wendell Clark went first overall. He's a defenseman that became a forward. His first year, he had 32 fights in the National Hockey League, and he was like just. He could score. He could do it all. I wouldn't put anybody of that era if they were both healthy. But Corson was a great player. And just missed out on a couple of Stanley Cups, but Olympic point-of-game guy, captain in Edmonton, captain in St. Louis. So I can totally see why at their peak they could be.
I think not the it might have been 2 years or the very next year they traded him for Matt Sundin, of course. But imagine, just going back to franchise players and stuff like that. Imagine the fucking way the NHL would have changed if the Sundin never ended up on the Leafs.
Yeah.
That was just something I learned during my break here.
There you go. Yeah. So on that note, let's hear a word from our sponsor, and then we'll come back and we'll have Ron MacLean with us, and we'll be back in a minute here on Third Man In. Concussions are serious. Whether you're a concerned parent, a coach, a risk manager, an executive, or even a player, they're a major area of concern. HeadCheck Health has developed software and services that improve the way concussions are assessed, tracked, and managed at all levels of sport. Their goal is to create a safer environment of play by giving better tools to the people responsible for documenting and assessing concussions, as well as providing better data to administrators to make real health and safety improvements. HeadCheck currently works with the Canadian Junior Hockey League, BC Hockey, Rugby Ontario, the Western Lacrosse Association, and more to advance concussion management practices. If you're interested in learning more about how HeadCheck can help your team or organization, please visit headcheckhealth.com or email info@headcheckhealth.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, our next guest to kick off Season 2 of Third Man In podcast has been with Hockey Night in Canada since the mid-1980s when he walked out on a DJ career at CKRD in beautiful Red Deer, Alberta to pursue a career in broadcasting. He is a level 5 referee highlighted by a couple of NHL preseason games in the mid-2000s. He has won multiple Gemini Awards for sports broadcasting. He has covered numerous Olympic Games, including Rio in 2016, which is also the name of a great Duran Duran song. He is an Oakville resident, but is part of every small town in Canada from Powell River, BC to Pasadena, Newfoundland. Along with joy dropper Tara Sloan, one of the faces of Rogers hometown hockey, and single-handedly brought back the classic Letterman jacket as a result in 2018. He is a tantalizing traveler, a curious Canadian, a pleasurable public speaker, an illuminating interviewer, a breathtaking broadcaster, a fun-loving philanthropist, an unfailing friend, literal lifesaver, one of the greatest ambassadors we have in the game of hockey in the country of Canada, a national icon, and the wordiest wordsman I know. Ladies and gents, my good pal, Rockin' Ron MacLean. Welcome, Ron.
God, TR.
Guys, I'm going to jump in and say, Ron, eventually you're going to get that call for the Hockey Hall of Fame, and I can't think of any other intro to get you out there than what we just heard.
Well, Charles and Mike, I love TR and I have are you guys music guys?
Oh, big time.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So we can go down that avenue for sure. Fanfare for a Common Man is a brilliant start, right? Because it all comes down to the rink rat in us all, and for sure music is the other sort of ace for me in my life. So that was a perfect choice. I'll play you, see if you recognize this, and then I'll tell you guys a little story. This is Anybody have any idea what that is?
No, you got me.
It's a pop song. It's you don't need to know. It's 70s pop, so it's
Talking Heads?
kind of beneath us to know what it is. But what it is Santa Esmeralda's cover of the Animals' Please Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood.
Ooh, I love that tune.
Why I
don't
played
think I
that
knew that, Ron. Yeah.
is my hero was a DJ named Raccoon Carney. He was on C-Fun in Vancouver. And he could hit the post, is what we call it. When you talk over the musical bed before the vocals start, you either hit the fade or hit the post, is what we called it.
Yeah.
And it was a real talent that disc jockeys had. And they had to have a mental clock in their head. They were working way back in the day without, digital clocks and timers. And he was amazing. He would come on at 9 o'clock in Vancouver, and I would tune in at 10 Alberta time on my little radio, the Panasonic I had in my room, and I'd sit there in front of the radio watching a radio like I was looking at a TV, trying to imagine this Raccoon Carney guy. And it was a 57-second intro. It's not the longest in the history of the world, but for him to come on at 9 and ramble for 57 perfect seconds was what I aspired to. And then Terry and I would go down every year to the Brad Richards Golf or various charities around Atlantic Canada, and we would get into music. And Terry explained to me how the Beatles' A Day in the Life has the longest sustained chord in the history of music. You know how long it is?
57 seconds.
It should be. It would be a better story if it was.
I thought it was coming around that way, yeah.
Yeah, it's 43 seconds. Sorry to screw that part up, but it's anyway. TR taught me that it's an E chord, and the three of the Beatles, Paul, John, and Ringo, all got on pianos together. I only learned this, Terry. Yeah. That George Martin, the producer, got the three of them on three pianos together. They hit the E chord to create this. They tried to hum it. They tried to end the song humming that chord or that note, and they couldn't. So that's how they decided to go about it. And it's at 43 seconds, the longest sustained chord in history. And Terry taught me that way back years ago at COVID, Prince Edward Island, and it kind of reminded me of me loving the 57-second intro.
When you said the 57 seconds, I was going to say kind of like A Day in the Life. But I'll tell you two things about that for our listenership out there. Ron's got a great memory because I told you that at about 3:30 in the morning in a garage. Yeah, that's true. We listened to the Beatles. We listened to the Beach Boys. We listened to just about everything. But on that particular evening, I remember Ron being blown away by that fact. And not only that, so a lot of you out there, Ron's a wordy guy, as I said, and most people who watch know it. I watch Hockey Night in Canada. But Ron, the quote on the front of my book, it says, like a sustained piano chord, Terry's friendship lingers, or something like that. So that's where that comes from. A lot of people are going, it's a great quote, but I said, not only is it a great quote, but
it's so personal to you guys, which is great.
It's a 3:30 in the morning in a garage in PEI gym.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing, Ron, is I'm sure you can understand, too, from knowing TR as long as you have, in terms of hitting the post and like being able to like lay out an introduction before the lyrics of the words start. Like with TR, just to be safe, we had to pick an instrumental song. So just we didn't think he'd hold it to 57, so we just let it go.
And you know what? Before we let that thought go, Ron, my favorite, and there's a set of albums, I think you might be able to get them. I don't even know. I use Spotify now. I got CDs and I got my albums that I listen to the most. And there used to be a set of albums out called Cruisin'. And Cruisin' were like mix albums from the 50s, late 50s, and went into the 60s and early 70s, and they would have a different DJ, and they would profile a station. So I loved Russ the Weird Beard Knight, and he used to do that, what Ron just explained, that whole intro. And I know that lots of them do it, but back in the day, it was obviously took a little bit more talent when you didn't have so many toys and technology to play with. Russ the Weird Beard Knight, look it up. He died a few years ago, but he was on in Dallas. He was on in Texas, I believe it was Dallas, and he was my favorite, and there's so many we could talk about, but I recommended that to all the music listeners. Look it up. Cruisin'. It'll be like Cruisin' 61 and Cruisin' 62 to go all the way to the
I feel like I remember that. Like, I feel like that's a thing. I also had like a copy of one of those kicking around.
After this, we're going to listen to it.
Yeah, for sure.
So, Ron, normally... go ahead.
Yeah, it's energy, right? That guy is energy, and that is the medium. I thought that radio was about companionship, and obviously tunes. But I came to realize it's a lot about an energy, and that's maybe the success of Don Cherry, and it's the success of a good hockey game when there's energy, right? And so those guys that hit that post bring you, even if it's psychobabble, that's kind of the secret of Gord Downey, right? I mean, he was brilliant. He was poetic, but he was also obscure, and even if it didn't make sense, it had an energy or a musicality that was spellbinding. So we would do, you guys, every year we would finish the night on a song. That was the Beatles was one of the nights. It was a song that Terry chose. One night he chose Michel Pagliaro of Montreal.
Now listen to this, guys, because he's going
Some Sing, Some Dance. And I used it incredibly. I got to use that song when Aaron Asham and the Philadelphia Flyers were into Montreal for Game 3 of the 2010 playoffs. And again, Terry taught me that, and I reprised it, took sort of garage wisdom and put it on Hockey Night in Canada. What a lucky thing.
Now, I don't know if I've ever told you this, Ron, but this is what happened there. I know it's your interview, but this is an amusing story. I know, right? Who gets Ron MacLean on?
We've got an interview in air quotes.
We've had him on for 6 minutes, and he's had 30 seconds of airtime. No, but listen, this is true, and I'll sum it up. So real quick, but we did. I got Ron into Michel Pagliaro. I don't know Pagliaro so much, but at least that song, I remember talking about it, and it really stood out to him. So you know how they do Tim Thompson does the pre-game mix of the songs?
Yeah, they were fantastic. So good.
My book had just come out, Tales of a First Round Nothing. I was in Toronto.
Number one on
Amazon
one again
right
today,
now. Yeah, if you can believe that. And we'll get into that in a bit, but we were at the place called Hemingway's. I was with Alan Hawko, who's the lead on Republic of Doyle that was just still on at the time.
It was like, if it was 2010, it was like first season of Doyle, too.
No, it wasn't 2010. Listen up and fucking I'm talking, big boy. So, I'm just kidding. But we were at Hemingway, so I had, my book was there, and it was the release week. So I was real high. I just came from an interview with Bob McCown at Sportsnet, and I'm looking down at Twitter. And Ron, I guess, because Ron, I assume you don't run your account that much on Twitter, but someone...
Oh, no, I run it all. And I hardly run it, but I do run it.
Oh, you do? Okay,
oh,
so...
God, yeah.
Whatever it said, you know what? I always wondered. You do seem like a guy that would want to be in control of that, but I said he doesn't have any time. But anyway, I'm sitting there, and I'm looking down, so Hawko goes, what's it going to be? And I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, Ron just said that you will know the song that opens up Hockey Night in Canada tonight. He's doing it because your book just came out. And I hadn't talked to Ron yet. I was going in the next day to Hockey Night in Canada. I don't know if you remember that part, Ron, but you and Grapes were there. And I ended up going in, and we went on the air. But the day before, I'm there with the book. I'm sure he knew it was coming out, but I don't bother Ron either every time I'm in town with 10,000 texts. I'm like, I'll see him tomorrow. So anyway, they're like, what's it going to be? And I'm starting to think. I'm like, fuck, I don't know what it's going to be. Like, I'm thinking it got maybe a day in the life, but how are they going to do that? And then I thought about it, Ron. It came to me, and the whole bar was there, Hemingway's, and Hawk is telling them the story. And it's upstairs. It's like an open atmosphere. It's a really cool spot. And so he's convincing them all. TR knows what song it's going to be tonight. So I said, I'm telling you this. I said, it's going to be Some Sing, Some Dance. I said, I know it's going to be. Now, I'm here telling you guys, they're like, no way. And there's girls going, okay, well, if so, we'll, have these shots, and the guys over there, we'll play you this song. The whole bar, the bartenders are going, we'll give you a free tab. So I'm going, I think that's what it's going to be. And sure enough, it opens up. Yeah. This clip is on YouTube as
I know.
well.
I've watched it with you. Yeah,
it's wild. Some Sing, Some Dance, and they bring it in. It's the Montreal playoffs atmosphere, and boy, does it ever get you going. And it's a slow song. It's got a great melody. But Ron, that was it. I couldn't believe it. And then when the lead comes in, everybody in the bar was looking astonished. And at the end of the song, he's holding my book. It's like it's a fade out of my book. And he said, my friend has a book on the market. But I mean, it's a #1 seller the next day. So thanks for that. And that was a long story. But Ron, what we normally do is go, yeah. But it's worthwhile. We go chronologically. One, yeah. So I know you got so much, and starting with what you just came back from gold medal plates, but I'm going to get into that, and I'm going to get into the golf tournament we just came in and everything. First of all, I just would like to, fans like the chronological part of it and the stories. So to rewind right to the back, I know a lot of this, too, is out of my head. I could have looked it up, I suppose, but we're buddies. We talk a lot. You're born in Germany. Right? Or am I wrong on that?
No, that's right. Air Force brat, so Dad was stationed overseas.
And explain that a little bit. Only for a month or two, but does that still resonate with you?
Well, there's a little wrinkle in that story is that Mom and Dad were actually stationed in Metz, France. Metz is M-E-T-Z, France. Okay. So he was Air Force, Canadian Armed Forces. And I was born breech, which means twisted or turned around in the womb. So they had to get me to the hospital. Mom was in labor for like 48 hours, and it was becoming a difficult birth. And they realized the facilities on the base at Metz weren't sufficient. So they took me to the hospital, which was just across the border, far more sophisticated emergency, and did it there. So that's why I'm born in Zweibrücken, Germany, which was one of the Air Force installations for U.S. and Canada over there. And that was 1960, and I could have been a dual citizen, but in 1960 we were only 15 years removed from World War II, so everybody was terrified you'd be conscripted and brought into the German army. So I'm only a Canadian citizen as a result of being born on a military junket. But it was 2 years that I don't remember, of course. That's the only thing.
But they're from Nova Scotia, correct?
They're both Cape Bretoners. Both are Cape Breton Island. And one thing I will say about being German-born, when I started my hockey career broadcasting, that was actually a red flag at customs. Now it's not. Germany is one of the world leaders in economic growth and influence. But back in the day, Deutschland would actually kind of lead to further interrogation, if you can believe it, in the early 1980s.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. But a lot has changed. A lot has changed in the game. I was going to say politically with Germany, but I mean, Ron, in your life, in the game, I mean, and we'll go through a lot of those things now. But so the first thing then, you end up in Red Deer. What I wanted to ask you, I guess, I know that at some point you went, I think, to the Yukon, and you came. Take us through that part of the story, because I'm foggy on that, Ron.
Well, so Dad's military. We get sent back to Nova Scotia first. We arrive in Halifax in 1962 and spend a couple of years there, and then quickly out to Victoria in actually the tail end of 63. Live a year and a bit there, then go to Whitehorse, Yukon in 1964 through 68. And that's a really formative part of my life because two things were going on. One, there was no Anik satellite in the sky. Everything's changed so dramatically. But in those days, television was delivered via satellite, and you had to have one. We didn't even have one in the north in Canada in the 1960s. So we would get Hockey Night in Canada on tape, videotape, 2 days later. Saturday night didn't exist. We got it Monday on videotape.
Wow.
I've got
to tell you this. I grew up in Lab West, in the Labrador part of the region, and when my dad first went there, it would be a week late. So the same type of thing.
Yeah.
You'd get the tape a week late. So fellas would try to hold out and not hear anything about the game, not talk about the game. If they're calling home to their families on the island or whatever, they'd hold out, and then surely they wouldn't be able to last a week, especially the diehard Montreal Canadiens or Leafs fans. And my dad was like, there was 1 year I was hell-bent on not knowing who won the Stanley Cup. I believe it was the Flyers year, 75. He said, I was hell-bent on not knowing who won the Stanley Cup. He said, I finished off my shift. The tape was in. I was going to go watch it. And he said, I was in the shower. And then, boom, someone says, yeah, the Flyers won the Cup, eh? Ruined it for him altogether.
Terrible.
And
Well, I was so young that I didn't, my mom got the joy of watching me see Toronto. I was a Toronto fan, and we won in 67, the Leafs, and I, of course, didn't realize that it had already been decided. Mom and Dad prevented me from hearing the news, and so I got to watch it, and they got to watch me watch knowing the outcome, which was a really lovely thing for them. But the satellite went in 68, and that's when live television came to places like your home and mine. So I lived there and I started hockey there, you guys. That was, a neighbor across the street had a backyard rink, and I was an only child. My parents were both kind of social, political, arts lovers, but not at all sports enthusiasts. But again, proximity, and when you're an only child, your neighbors become your extended family, and they got me over to the rink, and I really loved the game and played it religiously all my youth, although we moved from there to Nova Scotia, which made it a challenge. Outdoor ice wasn't as readily available where we lived near Halifax, and was there for a couple of years, and then out to Edmonton, and then Dad took as his final transfer Edmonton in order to try and raise me, their only boy, in Alberta, which was kind of becoming the land of opportunity. The oil patch was taking off. Peter Lougheed, the premier, had created a fund that was really a brilliant idea at the time to take care of a lot of different infrastructure. And so that was a great place to be, and he found a job with the RCMP in Red Deer. And that's grade 7. I enter grade 7 in Red Deer. That's kind of a neat thing because everybody's coming from various elementary schools, so you could be from any place and nobody knows the difference. So easy to fit in, and hockey was a great tool with which to fit in. And then I just kind of did my schooling thinking I would be a teacher when I was done, and broadcasting kind of created me. I don't know how it got me, but it did.
Did you? Wow, it sounds like it really got you, though. I mean, even just from the early years, because you had like 4 different jobs on. I say CKRD, but there was a couple more.
Yeah, for sure. I was the weather presenter. I was the DJ. Yep. You were everything. In a small market, you take on all these different tasks. And again, these are all skills that are woven into ultimately what I ended up doing. And I've always said, like that 57-second intro, that was a big part of my career for 9 years as a disc jockey. I was obsessed with trying to hit the fade or the post, and I was counting in my head as I spoke. So when somebody says to me, Ron, go 14 seconds, I can kind of tell. And that's a great life skill for a television presenter that I just fluked into. So I did, how it happened was 3 of my high school chums were working at the local radio station while I was in grade 10. And on the day a friend was supposed to work, he was ill, and he phoned his boss and said, get Ron, my friend, to come down to the station. It'll take you 20 minutes to show him the ropes. It was very simple, rudimentary operating of putting on station identification and a couple of reel-to-reel tapes on an FM station. And that's how it happened for me. I went down, I got my $27 for a 9-hour shift, and he said, good job, Ron, you come back next Sunday, and you can work every other Sunday going forward. And eventually they got me to read some news at midnight, which I crucified. And I just, got sort of lucky that way, and it always got lucky. That, as Terry knows, it was never I don't think I ever applied and got a job. I rarely have ever received a raise that, I didn't have to walk out to get, so a lot of things went my way, and who knows the secret behind that.
Now, the whole time, Ron, Well, they did, and there's more to that, obviously, because I believe you got to put yourself in the right position. But outside of proverbs and certain moral philosophies that I have on my own, I will ask, did you play hockey that whole time? Like, were you
all the way to 18 years of age? So I finished my midget. I played one game midget AAA, which is not bad, and then I played notch below and finished my midget career. And when I was juvenile age, I was cut by the Red Deer Rustlers, junior A team.
Yeah.
And I decided, at that very moment, I had begun broadcasting radio, DJing. So I was kind of worried. In those years, we didn't have masks and we didn't even have visors. So I was a little worried sticks were going to come up and clip my incisors, and I would have, if not a problem with taking time off for dental work, dental bone, replacement, I might have an impediment based on all, your teeth. I mean, they can fix them now, and I'm sure it wouldn't be an issue, but I was really worried about it in 1978. So I stopped playing hockey that year, and then I flipped over to refereeing that year.
That was my next question.
I was going to ask, though, with that, like, because you also work for CKRD TV as well, was that something that was on the radar and the idea of that same sort of thing being a TV thing?
What happened was the noon to 4 disc jockey at CKRD was automatically the TV weather presenter. So we were a tri-entity. We had an FM, AM, and TV operation. And they didn't care that, cute weather girl or the handsome weather guy. Nothing mattered. It's just whoever was on the radio at noon to 4 would get off the air at 4 o'clock, would voice a few commercials at continuity, we called that department, till about 5, and then you would phone Environment Canada with a map of Canada sitting in front of you, and you would jot down where the L's and the H's, the lows and the highs go, and he would teach you, or she would teach you how to present a cold front or a warm front or a trowel, which is a trough of warm air aloft. It was fascinating stuff, and some guys were uproariously funny in how they presented it, and some guys were just so serious, and it was like they were Al Gore. So it was a very enjoyable time. And it was also the time I began to experience anxiety because I would go on. We had a half-hour newscast, and our equipment wasn't great. So a lot of times the clips wouldn't run. The news anchor would throw to a clip, nothing. Throw to the next clip, nothing. So suddenly we got to fill, right?
Yeah.
And it would be me on the weather map on the TV for 7 to 8 minutes with not really having prepared for 8 minutes. And if you've ever had that fight or flight knowing, you're on and you got nothing. I went through that and it sort of began a long fight with anxiety that I thought I was the only person in humanity that had ever suffered it, of course. Nobody spoke about those things. But eventually I got out of myself, which is the secret, or at least I think it's the secret. I stopped worrying about how I was coming across and get back to what it was I was trying to do. And I fought my way through it, but it was a tough decade, I'll tell you.
It's funny. My brother always tells a joke, and he especially leaned on a lot in high school, was my favorite weathermen are always Ron MacLean and David Letterman. Because you guys both got your
birthday, right? I don't know if you know that, both April 12th.
Oh, wow, I did not know that.
But my favorite is when I went down to Charlottetown and spoke at an event. Boomer Gallant was an iconic weather presenter in
Talk the dirt coming.
Boomer, yeah, you know the joke, right? So he says Ron MacLean wouldn't know a warm front if he wet himself.
When was this, Ron? Have you always gone? I say this, and I'll get into it later because I know Ron largely through the late 90s and early 2000s. We do golf tournaments in PEI. Are you talking about one of those times or way back then?
No, it was a different event for UPEI, TR.
Oh,
I went down. I had actually gone to Prince Edward Island for Gerard Gallant.
Yeah.
We hosted, and I did a back-to-back. I did the Summerside for Gerard, and he brought Stevie Y in, which was fantastic. We actually stayed that time at Lucy Maud Montgomery, is the creator of Anne of Green Gables, of course. We stayed in her homestead on Prince Edward Island, and it was myself as the keynote and Jim Ralph. Do you know Jim?
Yeah, he's great. He's a good public speaker.
Yeah,
I've seen him
unbelievable speaker, right?
Yeah.
So he should be, but he's a great MC too. He's actually better at emceeing because he's so good off the cuff. So we were staying together in the homestead of this mansion from years ago that belonged to Lucy Maud when she wrote Anne of Green Gables books. And we ran out of booze, as we always do. So we start rummaging around in the basement looking for more beer or wine or something. And we find a bottle of wine, and so we gulp her down. And then we find out the next day that it was an heirloom, like worth thousands of dollars, and an historical piece that belonged to the tradition of this, Anne of Green Gables. Anyway, I didn't get invited back to that one. I thought it was because I drank that Lucy Maud's bottle of wine.
You didn't have time to fill it with Welch's, eh?
No, I should have. Stupid of me, but I was too. You know how you go to bed those nights. I didn't tidy up.
So Ron and I, the first time Ron I actually shook your hand if you can believe it. Do you remember in the late 90s? Because you must get your golf tournaments and PEI mixed up. But it was because I ended up being on Hockey Night in Canada shortly after this. But before that, there was a skins game in PEI with Freddie Couples, Mike Weir, Mark O'Meara, and John Daly. And I was one of the celebrities there. And you were, and I just walked over. I don't even know if you were. I shook your hand. I don't think I even explained who I was. But none of the Canadians wanted to go, and I loved PEI, as you know. We got good buddies there. So I said, sure, I'll go up there. And I remember Anne Murray being there, and God, there was a lot of hockey players too. There was not just Anne Murray. There was a lot of musicians. Great Big Sea. A couple of the boys were up there from them, and Kirk Muller was there, and we had a great chat. But I went over to talk to Ron. And then that's when I realized, because I also played in Red Deer the year before. Ron's from Red Deer, and I had a big game one night, and him and Don had been talking about it on Hockey Night in Canada. So we go back.
What did you do? 5 points in your first game, right?
How do you remember that? That's unbelievable. That is, yeah. I get to guys in 96, 97. I played 3 games in Montreal. I had a bit of an injury, but I had a concussion, but that started to go away, and I was practicing. But they'd rather me practice, they said, in Montreal. So I practiced almost the whole year. But with 16 games left, they sent me back to Red Deer. And my first game, I had 5 points.
This was the one where like you were out of high school at this point, but you would go back and hang out at the high school because you had nothing else to do in Red Deer during the day?
When my hockey card came out, yeah. I went back to play junior. My hockey card
was
came
that the same high school Ron went to? Is it just, are you guys?
I don't even know if it was, but Ron was great, and they talked about it on Hockey Night in Canada the next night, and that really, and especially at that time where you couldn't just put something on Twitter or whatever, like everybody kind of knew what was happening, and I kind of miss those days.
It's sad in a way, though, because what you missed live, you can now see via social media. So there, a lot of times people don't really see it on Hockey Night in Canada. They catch up with it later on. So I am grateful in that regard. And it's funny, I was just this summer after I saw you at Aaron's event, TR, I went out down to Fox Harbor for Rick Bonus and the NHL Maritimers for Kids event. And on the way back, I stopped in Spring Hill, Nova Scotia, where Anne Murray has her center to honor her amazing career. And I stopped by, for me, the greatest triumph in the history of victories. It's not the Oilers. It's not anything in sport. It's Anne Murray's Grammy for top female vocalist in 1979. Because I was a DJ, right? And that's it, right as I'm beginning my career. Anne won for her hit "You Needed Me," and she took down Carly Simon and Olivia Newton-John and Barbra Streisand and Donna Summer, and these were heavy, heavy hitters. So that would be tantamount to winning a Stanley Cup over Orr and Gretzky and Lemieux, and she did it. So I stopped in to look at the Grammy that sits there in that little museum in Spring Hill, Nova Scotia, and then I saw her report cards were posted in another display. It's a beautiful museum. And I went over to see her report cards, and it was like 95, 97, 100, 100, 99, 98. And I was telling Jan, not to drop names, but I was just with Jan Arden at Scott Oak's event 2 nights ago, and I was explaining, because they have the same agent, Bruce Allen, out in Vancouver, who does Bryan Adams as well. And
nice.
I was saying, Anne's report cards are fantastic. It's unbelievable. Like from grade 4 to grade 12, she doesn't miss. She never goes below 95 in any category, in any subject. And Jan said, yeah, she's hard, because she would ask Jan to write something for her book or write something for a project she was working on, and then she would send it back with spelling corrections and grammar fixes. That's Anne Murray.
Brian Killera from the Ottawa 67.
Loves her.
Oh, yeah. The only thing that he'd listen to in his office was Anne Murray tunes.
Yeah, and a 6-pack of Molson. Well, more than a 6-pack, but Molson Export. Yeah, she is an amazing woman, and so is her husband. Her brother Bruce lived just a stone's throw away from me here in Oakville, and I would stop by. He has a little He's moved into the city of Toronto now in a condo overlooking the lake. Beautiful spot, but I would go to Bruce's home when I was walking my dog here in Oakville, and I would think, God, once upon a time, he and Anne would hit the stage in Las Vegas just the way Paul Anka or Celine Dion or any lucky Canadian who dominated and owned Vegas. Those two were, she was it. She was connected to Glenn Campbell and as big as it gets. And it was hard to believe. Bruce had this little gingerbread home, and he was a teacher here in Oakville, great educator. And he's always my guy. When I would do a special with Anne Murray, I did a TV show with her. I did a radio Christmas special. I helped her with a double album. And I would always go to Bruce, and he would give me the story, as an example, TR, you'll love this. In the Murray household, when she was growing up in Spring Hill, Christmas Eve, they would have a bite to eat, and then he would play Dylan Thomas's A Christmas in Wales. It was an LP, an old album. And that's how they celebrated, to begin the Christmas. And the mom would decorate everything in blue. The lights were blue, the baubles were blue. So I did a Christmas special with Ann, and I said, "Tell me about the blue trees." And she said, "Oh, I don't remember, Ron." She's not a sentimental gal at all. She does not suffer fools gladly, and she's a frickin' scratch golfer over at Northumberland Golf Course in Nova Scotia near Tatamagouche.
I remember that, and I remember she actually blew me away because at that time, that would have been in the late '90s at that particular tournament. I'm sure she's probably been at a few. We were at Crowbush Cove, and not only did I find her really smart, but she was welcoming. She was warming. We just spoke, and I'm sure she wasn't too interested in what I did, but she certainly acted like she did, and she was. And and I couldn't believe how good of a golfer she was. I don't know what I was expecting. I was just expecting the Anne Murray from the infomercials at night, before that.
Right.
Not that I don't have respect for Anne Murray, but it was a weird time in her career. She was in between being, I don't want to say underappreciated, which is now, it's like a legend, Yeah. She wasn't quite... Everybody
you're right,
knows
because she was kind of, she had gone away from the Juno Awards. I can't remember the whole background to it, but I think she had felt slighted at some point along the way and had been disrespected. So you're right, there was a window there. And Anne's, even now, I would love her to come on Rogers Hometown Hockey and sing for us, but she just stopped cold turkey. And she's got no feeling or attachment for how great she was. She's just happy to be a good human being and a golfer, and she was always a great all-around athlete. She was a teacher, and phys ed teacher before she broke.
That's unbelievable. I didn't know that either.
Wow.
So, Ron, we might as well ask you now. How did you get in? It's a very vague question, but how did you get into music? Where did your interest peak as a kid that all of a sudden you took it on? Well,
that for sure goes to my mom. She would sing endlessly. She used to watch him sing. You know what that was? It was a CBC show. It was kind of religion, Christian, gospel music. And Mom would, I think it came on in Alberta at Mountain Time at 5:30 on a Sunday evening. And I could always remember Mom would roar into the living room and throw the TV on, and she'd say, "Oh, shit, I missed the start," and it's a Christian show, Mom. You can't say...
Yeah, she sounds a lot like you.
Yeah, she loved music, and she would play. Catherine McKinnon was John Allen Cameron and Catherine McKinnon were her two favorites. Dad loved Anne Murray, and music was a really big part of my upbringing. I sadly missed all my high school buddies are all guitar players or musicians. I missed it. I was the talker. I guess I was cut out to introduce them, and I played tenor sax in the high school band, but I was going nowhere with that, and just loved it. And then when the DJ bug hit, like I said, it was such a fluke that it happened. But being an only child, I was really locked into television and then radio because those were my companions around the house. Mom and Dad were busy. Dad was a shift worker. So I really leaned on the spirit of those two mediums, and I think that's why it was such a big part of my youth. And I was just a rocker. I had no time for lyrics. I really regret, Terry, that you obviously have your education in literature. I missed it. I was now I'm a voracious reader, but I went through the first, I'd say, 30 years of life just television and radio, and talking to my mother and father gave me a vocabulary because it's a little more adult than your siblings. But I can't spell, and I certainly had no literary references. And I often read and I sit and I wish there was a prof, there's Google, but I wish there was a prof stood beside me so that I could ask, what the hell does that mean?
Well, to be honest now, Ron, I got a folklore degree, so a lot of me going back was really just, I obtained knowledge, but it doesn't get me much further than that. But it was quite interesting. I got, and a guy like you, I would have figured for sure, Ron, because the Talking Heads are one of your favorites, aren't they?
Yeah,
and we talk
I
about
love
the
when...
Beatles, and these are, Anne Murray, the Beatles, these are lyricists, a lot of them.
Yes, they are, and I only came to the Talking Heads later, right? And Anthony Kiedis of Red Hot Chili Peppers inducted them into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland, and he had a great point. He said, "You know why I loved David Byrne and the Talking Heads? Because it made me feel smart. I felt smart that I was a devotee, and I think that's the David Bowie crowd and
the Steely Dan crowd."
Yeah, and that's more a musical eclectic, though. I think in the case of Talking Heads, and they're kind of, I wouldn't say that they're like Gordon Lightfoot in the sense that all their songs sound the same, but I think where their genius lies is in the, Psycho Killer. I mean, who decides to write that?
Yeah.
Their lyrics are just...
Their lyrics are amazing.
I mean, David Byrne's the only guy that can write the perfect love song, and it's all about him staring at a lamp. And this must be the place, more or less. Like it's.
I just love heaven. Everyone leaves the party at the same time. So I used, as TR knows, I would end my nights if I had a few drinks, much like it would happen in the basement at Terry's mom and dad's. I would put on my favorite DVDs, which would be The Last Waltz, for sure. Stop Making Sense by the Talking Heads. Trumps that. I think The Last Waltz has to be the greatest DVD in music history. But I would watch Neil Young's performance in 1971 in Los Angeles, the Gold Rush. It just absolutely Neil Young and the Talking Heads, and then The Last Waltz. Almost every night, poor Carrie, my wife upstairs, listening to this thing, and it got louder as the party went on.
That's what I listened.
All right, I have a very important Last Waltz related question.
That's what I listened to on the way here.
Oh yeah,
literally as I pulled up, Forever Young was playing.
And this is one I'll always throw out to people: best non-band song on The Last Waltz.
Oh, no question. My answer.
You're gonna say Forever Young.
No question. Mine is always Van Morrison
Caravan. Caravan is the best non-band song on that record.
Oh, the best non-band song? Yeah, that probably would have been. That probably would have been my guess.
Oh my God, his performance in Caravan
is so subjective.
No, it's a subjective question. It's not a guess. It's just your opinion on it. But yeah, I just fucking love that song.
We had like a 2-hour conversation.
I love Ronnie Hawkins exiting the stage. Housecat and I. You know who Housecat is? Trevor Burke. He's from PEI. He's with the Charlottetown Islanders, right? He's a dear friend, and he got me aware of this when Ronnie Hawkins leaves the stage and he yells, "Big time, Bill!" And it's just kind of a shot at the whole pretense of the occasion. But other than that, it was magnificent.
Fanning himself with the cowboy hat off the way stage, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, Muddy Waters, Muddy Waters almost didn't make the DVD because he wasn't in the movie. It was that Laszlo Kovacs, who's a incredible Oscar-winning DP, and all the camera operators on it were just these insane guys like that. He just got so fed up with Scorsese chirping in his ear, he took off his headset and didn't hear the call to just stop rolling. We're going to save film on this. And so he was the only guy who kept rolling on Muddy Waters, and that's why most of Muddy Waters' performance in the movie is just one camera. Which is so cool.
Just on a side note, because I would say over the years, Tom Petty's become my favorite, the late Tom Petty. Good. And his band Mudcrutch performs I Forgive It All, and it's just a person in the crowd with a phone, that records it. But if you have a chance, watch I Forgive It All. It's probably going to be Googleable by Tom Petty, but it was Mudcrutch that was doing it. His band that had an album before and after, really.
I absolutely love that when they came back a few years ago. I love every song on the album. And
so do I.
Speaking of Tom Petty, The Last DJ is a song that very much sums up what we were talking about earlier with the DJs and the different eras. And the changing of the guard, I highly recommend that. It's mid-2000s, I believe, by Tom Petty, The Last DJ.
2003, I think.
There you go. Yeah, we got a couple music fans here, Ron. Now listen, Sam, we're going to get back into that. Speaking of Carrie, so I know that you guys went out, I believe, early on. I think high school. I could be wrong. You moved to Toronto in the mid-'80s? So were you guys together that whole time? And when I think of Red Deer with you, I think of just a few years before you went, but that was the better part of a decade, wasn't it?
It was. We started in 78 dating, June 22nd, 78. We began dating, and then we were engaged 3 years later on June 28th. We were high school sweethearts. Her locker was across from mine in the school that I attended, which was the Catholic high school at the time, Camille J. LaRouge in Red Deer. So Carrie was grade 10, I was grade 12. I'm robbing the cradle, but we would talk a lot. And honestly, what attracted me to Carrie, other than she's stunning, was she had a Molson Canadian T-shirt she wore a lot, and me and beer. So I just thought that has to be the one for me.
Wow.
So I tried for the longest time to get Carrie to take an interest, and she wouldn't. And then I don't know how it happened. We just finally, I started. I'll tell you what happened. I think helped is in grade 12 I was cast in a TV commercial. And by then I'd begun doing my radio work. So again, they asked me to do a TV commercial for high school graduates, and it was a men's clothing store. It was just promoting their prom clothing, and I got to do it with a woman named Holly Warkentine from Lindsay Thurber, the public school. She was gorgeous. And then we started dating, and I was horrible. I just hockey and music, and shy, and just terrible with women, and not that good looking. So there was a lot of things holding me back. But anyway, I got to date Holly Workentine, and that, I think, gave Carrie the incentive to agree to a date, and then the rest is history.
Shy, good-looking, hockey, music, and terrible with women. Ron, we had the same high school experience.
You don't end up on radio or podcasts without some of that as your DNA.
Yeah. Hey, and then you got a girlfriend that's better. Speaking of the talking heads, meaning Carrie, of course. So when you guys moved to Toronto, because again, a lot of this we're skipping over, but this is interesting. When you first went to Hockey Night in Canada, Dave Hodge was there, right?
Mm-hmm, for sure.
And so you were with. Explain how all that went down.
Well, Dave had accepted a job in First of all, I got a break. TSN began their operation in 1984, the sports network. They hired a lot of Albertans. They hired John Wells, Jim Van Horn, Peter Watts, a lot of guys out of Alberta to come down to Toronto to helm their coverage. That opened the door for me to leave Red Deer and move into Calgary and replace Jim Van Horn as host of the Calgary Flames. 2 years later, 1986, Dave Hodge accepted a job at CKNW Radio for about $150,000 a year, which is huge money back in 1986. He would work Monday to Friday. Yeah, it's big money now, right? Monday to Friday, and then he would fly in and do the Saturday night in Toronto with one caveat. He asked if the Canucks were playing at home on a Saturday night, could he host those games and do the national show from there? And they agreed, which meant when the Leafs were playing and Dave was out at Vancouver, when the Leafs were playing at the Gardens in Toronto, they needed a guy. That guy became me. So I moved in to do it looked like I was going to do maybe 10 or 11 Saturday nights at Toronto, and the midweek package. They had Leafs on CHCH television. Dave could no longer do that because of his radio gig.
Right.
So I came in to do 41 dates at $1,000 a date. Was $41,000 was actually a pay cut to come to Hockey Night in Canada, and it was a tremendous cost of living change, way higher down in Toronto. So we were so poor. The first Christmas, Carrie and I each had $150 to spend, and that was our limit. We could not go past it. And I wanted to buy her a pair of jeans, but they were like $162. I couldn't. It was crazy.
So what did she do?
She gave me a pair of gunned mice, which we still have to this day, stuffed animals, and a sweater. And I got her a sweater and an album and a vinyl album, which was Cyndi Lauper, Girls Just Want to Have Fun.
Fuck, do you remember that? I meant what did she do in Toronto, but you remember exact presents.
She wasn't working
That's
yet.
unbelievable.
So we were kind of destitute
hey,
that
your
year. And Carrie caught on. She had her degree in rec admin from University of Alberta. So she got on with the town of Oakville, which is population 200,000, but they keep their town designation. And she worked for Parks and Rec here in Oakville and augmented my salary, probably making about the same amount of money. But it was a really lean couple of years. And then Dave, of course, as we know, flipped his pen, but I still didn't make any money for the long. I didn't have a contractual breakthrough until 1994. It was the first time I was in any position to ask for a raise. And luckily for me, Labatt came in, and Molson had always been the title sponsor, but Labatt came in, and there was a man named Don Kitchen. He was an incredible human. Just a really kind guy. Died at 44 of a heart attack. Not obese or anything from beer drinking. He just one of those, genetic unfortunate situations. And he and CBC gave me bumped me into six figures, which was when I could finally afford a house in Oakville. Because until then it was, and most of this is in my book, I think, cornered. But
it is. I don't remember all of that. I did read it.
Why would you? That wouldn't be something I'd
No. I mean, I loved it, Ron, but there's so many facts in a Ron MacLean. That's why I get I'm connecting dots here, but the little stuff, it's tough. There's just so much. And so
I think only one of us read it twice.
But that's.
Are you including Ron in that, by the way?
No, I read it. I read it for 3 frickin' years.
Okay, you got me
16
beat.
drafts of the book, and by the time you finish, you're so twisted. Terry, even doing your book, I'm sure you were 2 years doing it. It's just such a process.
I got another one coming now, and it's to me. And I always kept journals, so now it's almost. It's the elimination process. Like, which ones do I put in? Because the themes of the book and the feel is everything, So it's the order, and then once you narrow it all down, you got to For me, I re-edit it, and then I call all my buddies always to make sure that, because we live such crazy lives a lot of the time, and you're meeting so many people. That's why you're so good at what you do. You remember all the names. I don't, and I sometimes I'm like, you tell a story enough, and things start to crop up that maybe didn't happen. So I call everybody, and I'm like, is this the way it happened? That happens to everybody, right? So
am I bleeding 3 PEI garage outings into one?
Well, yeah. Or like I remember that, for example, talking with Ron. I remember at the end of the tournament, in the I was there with Jeremy Hart, 3 or 4 in the morning, and we spoke. I'm not sure that's the way it went down. Actually, I'll check with you now because that story's in the next book. But I think it was.
Yeah, I'll do the fact check. Go ahead. What do you remember?
Yeah, I'll tell you what I remember about PEI. So I guess we should remember our buddies there. So beginning with that tournament, guys, in the late 90s, I was asked to do the skins game. So I did it, and as a representative of the Montreal Canadiens. There's celebrity on each hole, again, hence Anne Murray and Ron MacLean, and that's how I met them all. But the next year I went back to do a Boys and Girls Club, and I did it as like one of the main, I hate to use the word celebrity, but back then definitely more so than now. I was on the Montreal Canadiens as Atlantic Canadian, and I believe Ron was there again. And then Brad Richards came on the scene. So I would go up and do these things as, a guy from Newfoundland that they were, again, celebrity, whatever, played in the NHL. They were very good to me. But then Richie took it over in the mid-2000s. He came on the scene and then with Rimouski and was this unbelievable player, won a Stanley Cup early in his career with Tampa. That was
Conn
2004.
Smythe as well, wasn't
Conn Smythe. Yeah, which me and Senior had out in his pool, dropped in the bottom of his pool. But anyway, so that was it. And we would go back, and Richie kind of took it over as his thing. It was his tournament for a while. I even went back this year and did the Boys and Girls Club. I love people from Forby Kennedy and Mike Kennedy.
Well, just to be clear, TR, I'll give you one fact check.
You can go from here. I just try to give
Boys and Girls actually carried on for, I think this was their 25th, right,
yes,
this year.
Yes.
So it never went away, and Brad didn't usurp it. He just went and augmented. He had another golf tournament. So I actually showed up at that Boys and Girls that you're referring to early, when David Lang and certainly Doug MacLean and all these guys were there.
Yeah.
I went with Karen Stemmel and Lisa Jarvie came out to the motorhome. We were just tootling around in a motorhome. I wasn't even in the tournament, but we decided to swing by the golf course, and then Karen Stemmel and Lisa Jarvie, 2 great Canadian alpine skiers, came out to the motorhome and said, "Ron, come on in." And I had no shoes. We had just left a friend's house, and I was in shorts and no shoes, and I walk into this golf club, honest to God. And that's pre-Twitter, evidently, because I'm still in a career. But there's been a few moments that have gone viral, but that one was a bad one. And I was in no shape to be walking into a golf course. But so I saw you there, and then you came out later that night with us, but we were actually not part of the Boys and Girls, unfortunately. Trent Burt has always wanted me to do that. That's another Burt, Trevor's brother. But I have Calgary Stampede usually every summer, and that conflicts with me appearing at that one, so it's too bad. But go on, what next do you remember?
Well, I just really wanted to bring that up and how that all happened, because that's a big part of our life. We would meet there every Sunday, and the boys love it. And all the, I say I would go over, but my dad would come with me, Ryan Clough, Teddy Purcell. For 10 years there, for either one of those years, a random mix of all the above would end up there. And it was just, it was and continues to be a great time. It settled down a little bit. Jason McDonald.
Great guy, Frenchie McDonald.
Frenchie, Darcy Harris would come on down. Billy McGuigan. I can keep going, name dropping. A lot of people kind of wouldn't know, but it's a great time. And Ron, so you weren't there this year, but Trent said this was his last year and everything. So he said, I'm not doing it anymore. It was kind of like a going away party almost, but this being the 25th year. So we did it, and it just ended up being awesome. Serge Savard came and had a big speech, and Clint Malarchuk, again, I'm going to bore everybody if I keep going, but I don't see it as being the end. We stayed for a couple of days after and just had a great time. It was one of the better
I feel
years.
the same. I saw Bruce Guthrie at the Fox Harbor event, and he said the same thing. It won't end.
Phenomenal.
And hopefully I can do it, although next year I turn 60. So we did, when I turned 50, we did a really great boat trip with all my high school friends from Red Deer, and they're strewn all over Canada now. But we will do another massive July trip to kind of set the sails for the next part of our lives. One of my favorite writers is a guy named Kurt Vonnegut, and he always talks about cleansing and renewing oneself for the different sorts of years that lie ahead. And that's what we kind of did at 50, is just say, okay, what are we going to do? Are you going to keep walking into golf clubs without your shoes, or are you going to grow up? And I haven't yet, but I'm trying.
there are people are going to laugh, but you share a similarity with my old man that way with Senior. You guys are real smart, but his shoes are still coming off.
Yeah, everything's coming off, right? Except pants, thank God.
Yeah, you just like to have a good time. And now there's another thing I got to ask you, because this year, we did Aaron Asham's golf tournament in Manitoba. For those that don't know, it was about a month and a half ago. It's called Aaron's Chance to Play, and we raised money. When I say we, I mean I've been doing it for a while with Aaron, so it was great to have you come out there, Ron. It was awesome. And a couple of years ago, I don't even remember what one it was. I was in Toronto, and the NHL alumni, by the way, sets people up. It's great. Whenever I'm in Toronto, I call them and I say, I'm here if there's any event. So you'll do an event for a few $100, whatever it might be, and getting to meet all these people, and it's awesome. So they had me at an event. Remember, Eric Lindros was there. He was at the head table, and he was about to get inducted to the Hall of Fame. I can't remember what event it was we did. But my question was do you do a lot of these? Like I randomly, you're my buddy, but I randomly see you at all these golf events. Is that what you plan your summer around?
Yeah, I tried this year. Like last summer, I did 45 dates, and a lot of those are like the writers at Woody Point, which is Stephen Brunt, my colleague at Sportsnet, has a great writers festival. It's 4 days in Woody Point.
Last weekend.
Yeah, beautiful thing. So I went to St. Albert this summer for the Humboldt Broncos. We played hockey, 3 days, 5 games. Colton Parayko had just won the Stanley Cup, and he played it, and God love him, and he was incredible. One step, he reminded me of Paul Coffey's first step, and I didn't expect it out of Colton Parayko.
It's a huge compliment, Paul Coffey's. Yep. Paul Coffey's arguably got the biggest first step. Man, I loved watching that guy play.
Yeah, he could go goal line to blue line, out of his own zone in a step, and Parayko does that. I mean, it's not unusual for a guy 6'5" or 6'6" to be able to do it, I suppose, but he's a very beautiful skater, and I didn't expect that, because I kind of, in my head, pictured him as the great sweeper poke checker, using his reach to nullify the offense that way. But man, can he skate. And he was in it. Nick Holden of the Vegas Golden Knights was in it, so we played. Then I did Aaron's, and I did Bobby Orr's for a couple of days, did Rick Bonuses for a couple of days, did Adam Graves. I'd say probably this summer did about 8 charity events, and those are where, TR, as you know, that's where you can have a beer and really get a story and enjoy and understand, and you just learn. I just did Scott Oakes, which was one night event out in Winnipeg for his late son. So I really, on the one hand, I should shut down because it's a long, hard year of travel and you're kind of mentally gone. But if you don't do it, you miss the real human touch and the fun.
And that was something I wanted to ask you about, actually. So obviously, how do you prepare yourself? Do you get a break in the off season? I guess you kind of just filled us in on that. But how do you prepare yourself going into the next hockey season? Because I think arguably you're probably the most busybody of the hockey.
Well, this year is tricky because we've brought back Battle of the Blades. You know what that is?
Oh, yes.
The figure skating thing?
Yeah, so it's a figure skater and a hockey player doing kind of a Dancing with the Stars on ice.
Right, yeah.
And we did it for 4 seasons and had a good run. And they're bringing it back. Sheldon Kennedy's agreed to do it. Natalie Spooner's agreed to do it. A lot of the creme de la creme of figure skaters, Katerina Gordieva, one of the greatest ever. So it won't be, Olympic caliber skating, but it's a neat concept in a way. The problem for me is that it's kind of a rootsy, a passion to skate, idea. Hockey Night in Canada is that, and Rogers Hometown Hockey is that. So I'm sort of sitting here through the last, I panic thinking, okay, what am I going to do to open Hockey Night in Canada? What am I going to do to open Battle of the Blades? And those are the stressors of prep that you experience and I experience, and it's kind of what keeps you young and going in a way. But it is, after, at my age, after doing it for 40 years, you just need muses. That's why music's such a help to me. And I'm not big on pop culture. I'm not big on social media, which I should be, because I would get ideas from those sources. But I'm learning to read and I've always had music as my muses to kind of come up with a new way to open the telecasts.
Interesting.
No, that's great, Ron. That's interesting. And I never really, it's always hard to really, not get a read on your brain, but to dissect it. And, because you're so busy, I often say to myself, like, how does he do it? But, the golf tournament's being busy, but you're right, though. You still get those stories. I don't consider it work. I'm doing it far less than you are, but I guess where you're kind of working, but you get to unwind, and that's where you sew things together. I guess you wouldn't have doing what you do, like you just said. 3 of the things you mentioned involve having somewhat of an intimate relationship with the people that you're either interviewing or the place that you are, and how better to do that, I suppose, than
that's it. That is absolutely the key to the deal, because the old adage, if the joke's funny, the people will laugh. Well, how do you know if you're in an ivory tower at the CBC Broadcasting Center in Toronto? You have no sense of, and I'm always amazed. Like, I was out at Portage for Aaron, and you were there, and I was bought by 4 doctors, and you kind of think to yourself, 4 doctors, how crazy can it be? But it was crazy,
when you were,
they were just fantastic, right? And just a really good time. And if nothing else, even if I don't recall a word of what was said for 2 days in Portage, and I do, but even if I didn't, I would break from it would be an escape. It would be a literal wall between the worries you have and the work you have. So it's important to do that. It's important to shut down somehow, some way. And I hate, because Keith Richards, the quest for oblivion or search for oblivion, I know it was probably a big part of how he managed his stress and the pressure, and it's obviously physically destructive at some point. So there's a fine line there that we all try to walk in order to maintain our, to center ourselves, as is the saying.
So even to this day, going into a broadcast, you still feel pressured and
for sure. Pressure is the wrong word, and even responsibility, I suppose, is the wrong word. But I feel a real opportunity has been given to me. I just feel like, okay, how lucky are you that Terry and St. John's, and Adam Creek in Victoria, and you can connect those dots by sharing some of the wisdom of all these folks you've run into and all these places and their traditions. And and the writers at Woody Point, there's a writer, Al Pittman, I didn't know who he was, a poet, and it's just you go and you sit in front of this guy's, that's how I come to Ron Hines. Otherwise I don't know Ron Hines. And you can always borrow from all these just great influences. So it's a really lovely opportunity, but I do feel pressure to get it. I closed the Hockey Night in Canada at the end with a sort of a dissertation on the history of our handshake and the different ways people have embraced one another in our sport, showing Roberto Luongo and Danny Sabrin in a famous moment from years ago when Danny had to fill in an overtime situation because Luongo had to go have a shit. And it was a touching moment when Luongo, so to speak, when Luongo came back and was there for Danny Sabrin, and this name disappears. We never heard of Danny Sabrin again until this spring, Rowan Aranda won the Memorial Cup with him as their goalie coach. Yeah. And I just think, funny. And then I watched, Carey Price with the kid at the NHL Awards. Did you see that?
Yeah, that was so great.
Wow, that was a beautiful thing.
And
wasn't it?
Yeah,
it was right
in
the spirit of that. So
I tell you, that was a beautiful thing.
I'm sure that's how I'll open Hockey Night in Canada this year. I'll try to throw back to how we closed the season and then that. And I was even thinking that Bianca Andreescu, the woman who won the Canadian Open tennis, which I'm not, I don't know a whole lot about, but I happened to be watching, and she had to go over. Serena Ryder had to quit. I shouldn't say quit, but retire because of injury. And or was it Venus maybe?
No, it was Serena. Yeah, it was
Serena. Yeah,
and it's this weird thing because in tennis,
Williams, I think you're in the music brain there. You said Serena Ryder.
Oh yes.
Oh, sorry.
But yeah, it was Serena. But the other thing that's really weird about that, and it keeps throwing me off when it happened that day, was also that weird thing because when you withdraw from a match in tennis, it said that you retire from the match, but it's like Bianca Andreescu wins because Serena Williams retires, and I'm like, what the hell happened in the middle of this match?
I thought that was horseshit.
Yeah, it's a weird phrasing for it,
Yeah, it's a phrasing, but Serena Williams is sitting there and she's looking at that girl win and her home for the first, and she's still gonna act. Well, if I was, but like the whole was what's the word? What's the word? Smug. And the interview after, she let on that if she wasn't injured, it wouldn't have happened, and I disagree. And anyway, don't get me going while we got Ron.
But she hasn't. And the other thing is that she hasn't actually retired, so maybe there is a rematch at some point.
Not only
hopefully,
that,
soon.
But not only that, even if she did, even if she had a broken foot, grab some couth. You're in this country. Like, come on, you know what? She was on today. She would have beat me anyway. Yeah. This girl's great. Yes. That's all she had to say. A sentence.
You're right about that. I did sense that too. In fact, I would never get on and try to read someone's mind, but I do think there was an element of there's not a chance, snowball's chance, I'm going to win this match.
That's what I took from it, and it rubbed me the wrong way. Although I'm not going to sit here and say Serena Williams is one of. You could make an argument the greatest athlete ever. You could make one argument.
You could.
I don't make it, but you could make it, and she's close though.
And you know what, Terry, your wisdom, which is inside information because you've played, your sense of it is kind of important, and it actually elevates the victory. It lets you know that she was so intimidated by this talent that she was facing that situation. So I find it. I would have loved to her to say what you just said. You make a good point.
That's it. And then I'm fine with it. No, it's true. Just grab a little bit of humble pie.
I think my favorite quote of this show so far is "Don't get me going here when we've got Ron MacLean on the phone."
We'll continue all this later. Guys, it's the same thing. You know what we're going to get into later? It's like that steroid argument in baseball. I get it. I get why people did it. There was motivation. Andy Pettit does it. Says, you know what? Sorry.
Yeah.
It was, I made a lot of money here doing it. I'm in the, I did it for a reason. I'm sorry. Forgive me. But Barry Bonds is still denying it because he doesn't want anybody to think that he wants everybody to think every single home run I hit, even the ones that went 4 miles out into the bay.
Hold it. There is an element of not wanting people to have the satisfaction because, as you know, Terry, an apology, the people who love you and like you and will support you, they don't need an apology. And the people that don't aren't going to accept it anyway.
It's going to be a big I told you so.
I don't even want the apology, Ron. I just want him to say, I'm not sorry. I don't care about the sorry. I don't want him to say, I'm not sorry.
Well, he just doesn't want to give the media the satisfaction of that. Do you understand that?
It's a big I told you so at this point. Yeah,
but I mean, even years before that, I remember being a kid when he was still playing for Pittsburgh and reading in like the baseball books that you had for like children that were 9, which is I was at the time, like reading that and going and reading basically like them paraphrasing Barry Bonds is a friggin' dick. Like they were just like it was basically laid out that guy was a jerk.
Here again, I hate to be the devil's advocate, but I love to. He came and sat with us during the Pittsburgh Cup in '92. He came in every night. And sat with Don Sherry and me right between us, eating sunflower seeds, the three of us. And he was wonderful. But he hated the media with a passion. And Don kept kicking me and saying, "Get him on. Or at least put him on camera." I said, "No, I'm not. He's peaceful here. He's happy here. We're enjoying the game. We're talking hockey and baseball. This beats tennis. I got Serena Ryder winning the Wimbledon."
Yeah. Wow. And by the way,
that's crazy.
By the way, I don't think he's a dick at all. I met him at Planet Hollywood in Montreal. He played the Expos one night. That's you, Mike. I didn't say that.
It's something I remember reading repeatedly as
fair enough
in baseball stuff as a kid.
And not to hijack
it's always stuck with me. Yeah.
Interview, but
I'll give you an example of that. It's Tom Barrasso in hockey. Tom Barrasso was caustic, doesn't suffer fools gladly, signed off on the media, got sick of them. But he wrote to Jacques Pont as a boy and read his book Goaltending, and Paul Maurice, head coach of the Winnipeg Jets, had him in Carolina, and will tell you that he's the most decent man he ever had in hockey. So there's always a perception. What?
But Ron, again, Tom Barrasso's not up for the most saves ever. And he didn't get it, and then say, I did it because it's legit. All I'm saying, Barry Bonds is a great guy. I just wish he said, you know what? Maybe the needle that was going into my ass was filled with something. Looking back, and one year I won the stolen bases, and the next year I can't run the length of myself, but I hit 75 dingers or whatever it was.
Well, let me try a different tack. Again, I think he's just mad at the media, just like Tom Barrasso or Steve Carlton. But I also think, Ben Johnson. Do we think he was the only guy who ran dirty and sold?
No, but I don't.
Of course not. So I mean, should Ben have said I did it when everyone else was running dirty and he knows it?
No, but at this point, many years later, yes.
The obvious one is at the Tour de France.
Just tell me, Just tell me, like I'm not saying like, and even if you didn't get caught or whatever, like because I'm sure things get loopholes, but all these people are being interviewed. All of them are being asked, for the good of baseball. Some of it was legal, and just. Tell me that maybe, Barry, you're great. You're still going to be in the Hall of Fame. But tell me that maybe the needle that you put in your ass helped you at least elevate some of those balls over the fence. That's all I want.
If you're so against the media, you're never going to do that. If your enemy was always the media.
I think his motivation is a lot to do with personal pride. And
I wonder.
That being said, we're going too far with this, and I didn't mean to fuck up your interview with this.
No, it's good. It's outstanding. outstanding.
It is good to disagree with Ron.
I remember too, I don't know why this occurs to me, but I remember I've done 11 Olympics. We used to hijack the Olympics with doping talk for, I'd say, 5, 6 Olympics. That's all we did. We would find a drug story, no matter how, it might take us a day, but we would get a drug story, and then we could go on with our tribunals and discuss it till the end of the Olympics. Eric Lamaze, cocaine in Sydney. That used to be the thing. And now, and Americans, honestly, they don't care. I shouldn't say Americans. I think sports enthusiasts, as a rule, if they feel like this is what it takes to be that good, they almost don't care. And I'm generalizing.
You said almost. They definitely, but that almost gets closer to not caring at all when the people admit it. When they admit it, Ron, that's all. When they admit it. Like even, reading Lance Armstrong's book and then after what happened to him, again, it's not the steroids that I'm against. I get the motivation. I'm not saying that I would do it. I think there's a totally different argument now. Do you compare him with Roger Maris and Ruth and all? Now there's an asterisk. I don't know. It's a great, healthy debate. All I'm saying is that once these guys and girls get caught so blatantly, just come out and just tell me, because I know you're superhuman anyway. But come on, like he was a Hall of Famer. It just bothers me a little bit that we all caught you. Now you're under oath here. Right, you got a needle in the ass here. Tell me, come on, you must have known. You passed grade 2, didn't you? You got out of grade 2.
I can't. I might be able to Google the line, but I remember a lovely line about white lies. Now, this may not be a white lie. Maybe it's a little more than a white lie. But
I believe steroids are clear, actually.
Somebody wanted to. Somebody defended the idea of a white lie versus the truth, because I am a lot more certain of what is kind than what is true. Mm-hmm. And that's, I kind of put it in that, this is all a bit of a witch hunt, this subject.
I wish I didn't know now what I didn't know then. How's that?
Yeah. So I haven't thought it through, and obviously neither of any of us, but that I sort of protect your right not to, it's the old Cicero, you stop being a child when you realize telling the world your problems will make them go away.
And no, you're right. And I'll say he was great to me. Barry Bonds was a real nice guy to me. It was never about that, and I just want people to know that. And we could argue about the steroids thing all day.
Yeah.
It's just, it's different approaches, that's all. And it bothered me a little bit as I was a different kind of athlete, but that's it. There's more than anything, there's a boatload of respect going his way for everything that he did, with or without it. But now, Ron, talking about the Olympics, you just touched on the Olympics. So I want to go back. And that was part of it. We kind of got away from the chronological thing, which is all right, because you've done so many of these things, and that's a lot of people watch Hockey Night in Canada know you from that. If the Olympics are on here, they'll turn on the TV. I don't think they realize how many you've been to or the passion involved. I remember you years ago bringing up Abby Hoffman, a female athlete, I believe in the 70s.
Yes. Brilliant 800-meter runner. Kind of the forerunner of the... I mean, honestly, in our country, women's sport in the West was the Edmonton Grads, the basketball team, and there's a million names I could throw at you. But so obviously we've moved into a time when, through litigation in the U.S. with colleges, the opportunity for women's sport to find its place, its return to its place. I could go philosophically into how the whole world kind of lost its way, going militaristic and male-dominated. But we're moving back, thankfully, in a direction of equality and respect for, the woman's role in sport too. And she was one of our greatest leaders in that regard. And I do remember, Terry, doing the Rio Olympics when sexism was an enormous, point of activism. I was interviewing Penny Alexiak, is one example, and I brought up
she
her
won
brother.
Gold, didn't she?
She won gold. She won 4 medals.
She did,
including a gold, and she was 16-year-old phenom out of the beaches of Toronto. And I interviewed her and I asked her about her brother Jamie Alexiak, who plays in the NHL. Mm-hmm. And right away it was like, can't you just let a woman have her moment without having to, share? So everybody was on high alert. Poor Adam Creek, I just mentioned him. He's a gold medal winner in a 8-man rowing from Beijing. He criticized Jeannie Bouchard. He said that she was spending too much time with her commercials and her endorsements and her other activities and not enough time on her game. And that was perceived as sexist. And he really got hit hard.
Well, it's also an assumption. How would he know?
Yeah. Well, How would he know? How do we know? That's a good question.
I mean, because she wasn't quite as successful, still one of the most successful in the world, but because
he
she
was
wasn't
certainly
as
around
quite,
her, watching, things happen that, he would have seen her doing interviews. Like Don Cherry would always protect Bobby Orr, right? Or otherwise Bobby would have been at the Glass signing or doing interviews. And you have to protect those star players, as you know. But anyway, you're right. He shouldn't have said it. But it was incredible to see him get eviscerated for it, and it was a learning experience for him, obviously.
I didn't take it. Yeah, I didn't take it as any bit of a slight towards females or female athletes. I just took it, if he said that towards anybody,
any athlete.
Bit of an assumption because I'm on Twitter more that you think I'm spending all my time on it. But anyway, and that goes back. I know because he wasn't the only one. Lots of people said that, and I just always felt it. Maybe as someone whose career kind of went. Not the way that everybody would have thought. There's a spot in my heart for her because, there's an opportunity for her in the middle of all this to get some great deals, endorsements. Promoting herself is only promoting her brand, which she doesn't know how long it's going to last. So why not? If she doesn't practice, I guess that's
no, that's right. That's totally right.
No, but I'm glad you brought up Abby Hoffman because even a few times we have some beers and I start talking about the Olympics and that name comes up a lot. As do more, but
my favorite, I told you Anne Marie's winning the Grammy in '79 is my highlight of wins, but another fantastic and one of my favorite sports stories is where I live in Oakville. We have great paddlers. Mark Oldershaw was on the podium in London. Before that, Adam Van Koeverden won in 3 consecutive Olympics medals, including gold in Athens. And before that, Larry Kane of Oakville won gold and silver in Los Angeles in '84. And all 3 guys go back to a guy named John Wood, who was paddling in the Olympics in '76 in Montreal in the 500-meter C1 final, canoe one. And he saw just before the start of the race, his arch-rival, Alexander Rogov of Russia, was struggling, Soviet Union at the time, of course, was struggling to get oil off his hands. What happens is the committee boats or the camera boats, they're all around the course, and sometimes oil from their outboard ends up getting onto the competitor's hands, and it's deadly in canoe because they had, at the time, varnished wood paddle. Mm-hmm. So John Wood, the Canadian, kept a little wet towel with sandpaper sewn in below his seat, and he gave that towel and sandpaper, the sandpaper being, of course, the key to the deal to get the oil off the fingertips. And wouldn't you know it, the Russian beat him by 34 1/100ths of a second. And it's just a great story of sportsmanship that I often think of. The Olympics, like hockey, virtue has to mean something. So when you get a great example from an athlete, he didn't win. But it's a great, and Larry Kane, who won gold and silver in LA, went to Seoul the following Olympics, and I was there for those. He finished 4th in his, he was trying to defend in the C1 1000, and he finished in 4th. And that night at the bar, all the paddlers cut a bottom of a beer can out and made him an aluminum medal. And to this day, he has his gold, his silver, and his aluminum medal mounted in a plaque in Burlington, Ontario.
Those are my favorite moments. We often talk about this. I consider I consider you win the silver, not you lose the gold. I think
for sure.
And you do too. And those that was my next question. Do you know of any, or what's your favorite story? I guess that didn't end in a medal, but
I'll give you another good example like that. Simon Whitfield wins gold in Australia in the year 2000. It's the first time they've ever had triathlon, and he wins it, and his dad had actually come from Australia. So when Simon had gone to his grade 11 and 12 years in Sydney, Australia, so he kind of felt at home down there, and he just had a feeling he was going to do well, and he did. He won the gold medal. And he remembers at the start line, there was a big story that there were sharks in the water of Sydney Harbor. So they had netted it as best they could, and they had taken security measures to prevent the triathletes from getting eaten alive. But just as they were ready to start the race, which is a 3-part race, right, swimming and cycling and running, just as they were beginning the event, Simon said to his arch-rival, he said, "Careful, mate, there's sharks in the water." And the guy didn't even acknowledge him. And anyway, Simon goes and wins the gold medal. He said, 4 years later, I'm the defending champion. I'm at the start line in Athens. And wouldn't you know it, that guy, that arch-rival of mine, comes over and says, "Hey, careful, buddy. There's Mediterranean sea bass in the water." And Simon was so intent on winning his second gold medal and defending his title that he didn't laugh. He said, "I was in a horseshit frame of mind. I was tight. I had lost all my humor, and I was lousy. I blew up." 4 years later, I went to the event, and now coming back to Adam Creek, He had seen Adam Creek win his gold medal in rowing, and when they sang the anthem, Adam was hysterical. And so, what's his name? Simon Whitfield writes on his handlebars, "Sing like Creek," and he put himself deliberately in a light mood to get into the race, and he won the silver. He didn't win the whole event, but he put on a charge at the tail end of that triathlon. That's one of the greatest I've ever seen. He came from well back in the pack to get that silver medal, and that's, as you say, a win. Just a fantastic performance. That's not a gold.
And a great story. I always find it almost not comical, but when I say to people, I'm like, why are you even asking that question? Like, the gold medal is just, it's a great story. It's sitting on the wall there, but there's so many stories, and you know, it's all about human interaction and relationships. I mean, so, and you're coming back from the Olympics, supposing you didn't even make it to your event. Yeah. You've got a good story. But anyway, that's always the way I saw it. Ron, did you fight to get over there at the beginning, or did it just kind of happen? It just seems like you have a real, passion is too easy of a layup of a word, but you have a real interest and passion into doing the Olympics. Was that something that was forced on you, or your?
No, not at all. I was given the opportunity in '88, and I had a horrible shift. I would do 8 hours of field hockey, play-by-play, which was hilarious. But it's a big soccer pitch, so it was easy. I could look at my program, look back at the athlete, look at my program again, and it was all moving so slow to the naked eye that I was able to get away with it. So I do that from 9 to 5 in a little town called Songnam, south of Seoul, about an hour away. And then I would come back to the broadcast center after I got off my 5 o'clock game. I would drive an hour into Seoul, get there about 6, and I was back on the air live to Canada at 9 at night, and go till 1:30 in the morning, and then go to my hotel, which is about a half an hour away, get to bed at 2:30, be up at 6, and do that all again for 16 days. Wow. And I remember it was unbelievable. I was 28 years old is the only way I got away with doing it. And I remember one of the funny things at Songnam, the town where the field hockey was taking place, and this was the Ben Johnson Olympics, so eventually I just sat and watched TV for days on end. But when I was doing the field hockey, each day I'd arrive at Songnam on 3.5 hours sleep, and of course, one of the first things you need to do is go to the bathroom. I had to kind of bolt out of bed, quickly shower, and get down to the van. I had 20 minutes because I was trying to get every ounce of sleep I could. I'd get to the Songnam Stadium, and then I'd go to the bathroom. And they had these Asian toilets where you have to stand over a hole in the ground, and by the end of it, my quads were like Kurt Harnett's. So, as fate would have it, on day 14, there was a sold-out stadium. The South Korea women's field hockey team had made the gold medal match. So for the first time, we had a full house. So I go into the washroom that I'd been using for days on end, and I hit the first door. It's occupied. Second door, occupied. I go down. Finally, at the 14th door, there were 16 of them. 14th door is available. I open it up, and there's a North American toilet. So for all of the Olympics, I'd been shitting in a hole in the ground when I could have had the comfort of a crown or a throne.
Oh, that's incredible!
Wow,
that's what I remember. So
surprised I haven't heard that one before.
Something I was just curious about with regards to all the Olympic travel and all these things that you do is this week I've seen a bunch of stuff come up just because of another anniversary. This past week was just 3 years from that last HIP concert. And I distinctly remember I was actually with Chuck here. We were at the Duke here in St. John's watching it. You were in Rio with all those Canadian athletes at the pavilion, and you kind of got to you threw to that show. What was that moment like in terms of being with all those Canadian athletes in that moment, watching this kind of defining Canadian event?
So many things about it. First of all, the athletes didn't even know the hip. That was the craziest part. They're all so young. They hardly knew the Tragically Hip. So I can remember Melanie Bourgeois was a great boxer from Kitchener, and she was more interested in the TV lights and the cameras and everything that was going on. Some of them knew the hip, but a lot of them didn't. So there was that. It was Copacabana Beach. It was the craziest place in the world to be throwing. It reminded me of a song, Late Breaking Story on the CBC from Wheat Kings. It kind of felt like I was in a surreal situation. And just before I went on, I had about a minute, right, to do this opening to the telecast. And I had, as part of my duties, to explain that, there are parties all across Canada, and at Kingston's Market Square, here's the scene and how many people are there. And then the producer came to me and said, "Ron, Scott Russell's going to take care of that. You don't need that." So that actually kind of helped me because it opened up about 15 seconds for my 1 minute. And then I just had it crafted a little opening based on my favorite song, The Wherewithal, and really an homage to Gord Downey based on a literary critic. As I said, I didn't read for 30 years, but then I became kind of obsessed.
That's why this
Samuel
is all blowing
Johnson.
my mind,
Samuel Johnson was a literary critic who really broke down Shakespeare wonderfully in the narrative of the humanity, and he wrote Bonfire of the Vanities, and I always felt Downey was always about that. He was poking holes in vanity, poking holes in he's saying Canada's great by telling us we're not. And that was the beauty of Gord Downey. So I wanted to quote a lyric from The Wherewithal. My favorite song was, "I always loved that guy. He's not on TV anymore. He had to get out before. He had the wherewithal," was the line. But I got it backwards when I said it at night. I said, "I always loved that guy. He's not on TV anymore. He had the wherewithal to get out." And that's wrong. And nobody would know it because it's not a massive hit. But I just, in the confusion, I suppose, of it all, and the pressure to mention the five players, and I just remember freezing for a split second in my head, thinking, "Good God, Ron, you might as well have said it's the night Christmas before." You mixed up the order of the words. It's just horrible. But it was a great honor to do it, obviously, and just a couple of times I did the closing of Maple Leaf Gardens and had the opportunity to do the introduction to the Tragically Hip, and they were like, well, "How the hell does that happen, right? Where do you end up in these peculiar moments?" But you just have to be, the weatherman in Red Deer, or somehow it finds you if you're blessed enough to get into a groove of a show. And in my case, Coach's Corner, right? Who's lucky enough to be the guy that sits in and sits there with Don and just sits there for 34 years now? We've been doing Coach's Corner. It's like, how does that happen?
Well, that's what I was. I didn't know when I was going to get to that, and much
as anybody expects, an hour and 15 minutes in is when we're like, let's talk about Coach's Corner, I guess.
It's just
why not Serena Williams? My expertise.
Yeah. Why not? Yeah, why not Serena Ryder or Serena Williams?
Yeah.
So you opened up that door, and that's such a long. Tell us some good grape stories. Maybe early on when you got to know.
Well,
her.
I can connect Serena Ryder. This, again, I want to be clear. Some of the things we've done, I'm embarrassed about. Some of the things we've done, we should be fired for. And in a new world order, I don't know what the hell I'm supposed to say anymore. But because of Serena Ryder, I'll bring this story up. One night we were on, and Chris Simon, Ojibwe or Anishinaabe First Nation from Wawa, Ontario, had received a 30-game suspension for cross-checking Ryan Holwig of the New York Rangers. He comes back, plays one game, and in the second game upon his return, he stomps on Jarkko Ruutu of the Pittsburgh Penguins. He literally stomps on his ankle and literally
moved his foot. He moved his foot to stop it.
Or by the bench, I remember.
It's like a wrestling move.
So he gets a 25, and that's the Serena Ryder, the stomper. But anyway,
nice. There we go.
He gets the 25-game suspension, and I said to Don, a lot of people wonder, how could you get a 30-game suspension and then 48 hours later come back and get a 25-game suspension? Like, what does that say about supplementary discipline and whether or not it's working? And Don said, well, I'm not saying, but neither guy missed a shift. Not a single shift. Absolutely ridiculous to give. I'm not saying he should have done it. But 55 games for that, and then I said, trying to be the clever mouse that I am, I said, Don, Chris is Anishinaabe First Nation. A lot of First Nations children in Canada grow up knowing they're not going to get a fair shake. Probably didn't respect the authority or the decision as it was, so that would explain, why he wouldn't be so concerned about a 30-game suspension. And Don looks at me and he says, "What? Are you saying because he's Indian he's got an inferiority complex? What are you saying?" And I literally died on the desk. And he says, it was one of the craziest. And Phil Fontaine of First Nations, Assembly First Nations, he defended Don, and he was kind of mad at me for even going there. And it was, oh my God, it was one of the many times
that's
when we
one of those,
should have been fired.
I remember where I was.
Coin, there's going to be a lot of people pissed off either way.
I remember where I was when I watched that. I was in a gas station in Lab West in the middle of, I believe it was like the middle of March when that all went down. And wow, just hearing it from you, and I can, like, that just flashed me back. Geez, must have been 10 seasons ago, 11 seasons ago.
Guys,
probably.
I'm mostly just blown. I shouldn't be, but I'm just mostly blown away by how good that Don Cherry impression was. I mean, I've heard a lot of good ones.
It makes
sense that Ron's got the
Ralph,
best.
I can tell you that.
It's not like it's not in his head.
Yeah.
Right.
Another one, Ron, before you go on to your next one, same sort of thing, guys. A little bit of controversy. Ron was here a few years ago, and we went down to Mallard Cottage to eat.
Oh, my God, yes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and he comes out. Ron, you can probably tell it better than I could, so you go ahead. But he The word barbarian came up.
Yeah, we were doing the coach's corner via satellite that night, or double ender, and so I'm in obviously St. John's, and Don's at Toronto at the CBC building, and so he says, "What have you been up to?" I said, "Oh, I've had a great day here. I had a seal burger at Mallard's Cottage," and he's, "What? you don't eat seal? That just kills me. They eat seals. Can you believe it, folks? They eat seals. What a bunch of barbarians!"
Yeah.
And of course, that just. And that's one of the rare occasions where actually Don was in hot water and I wasn't. Usually it's me getting us both in trouble, and often I'm either the enabler or I'm the idiot. I'm one of the two when I do screw up, and I do screw up.
I remember he said you sicken me in that same segment, and that was it for me. I could not stop laughing.
We could all tell he was kidding. That's
I
the thing.
could not stop laughing.
I didn't think anything of it when he said it, because we were. But then as the night went on, and we were drinking, shit started to hit the fan. And by the time it came back again, I was back at Mallard Cottage having another seal burger. I swear to God, that's true. Anything, Ron. There's so many that you can get in with Tom, but anything else you could probably give. A lot of our listeners are from the States as well and from overseas.
Yes, of
probably
course.
don't
and
realize.
He's revered more. I think obviously the Boston Bruins love him in New England, and he's loved everywhere. For what can I tell you about Don? He's a miracle, really. He'll be 86 in February. Everything about Don Cherry is thought through. He looks like the guy that shoots from the hip, but I'll go by his hotel room when we're in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and there'll be close to 100 loose leaf pages where he's rewritten his ideas for the coach's corner that night. He writes it and practices it. When he coached, he used to drive Mike Milbury to the rink every game and tell him what he was going to say, and he is endlessly
How long did it take him
prepared.
to get to the game? 5 minutes? 10 minutes? How long? How quick were they going?
All I do know is they used to admire a weed on the side of the road.
Yes, I was going to ask you about the weed.
The thing that got Milbury upset was he didn't mind Don giving him his whole pregame pep talk. What he did mind is Don habitually pointing out this weed. I love that weed.
They
Isn't that
painted over.
amazing? That weed is still there, and they would talk about his stupid roadside weed. But that's Don. He is a sentimentalist. He is a romantic. I definitely one of the books I loved. It's a kind of a weird book, but the idea of the book I loved is called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the most rejected. It's in the Guinness Book of World Records. It's the most rejected book in the history of literature. But it ended up being a bestseller, and it's a story of two guys motorcycling across the United States on their way to the West Coast. And one's a classicist. He can fix the bike if it breaks down. He's technical about everything. The other guy's the romantic. If his bike breaks down, he's got to hire a guy to fix it. Doesn't give a shit about any of that stuff. Just thinks about blue skies and moonlight. So the argument is, in the book, or the basic idea of it is, which is the better approach to life? And they kind of have many neat metaphors on the way. They find the Rocky Mountains, and they both agree that had they not driven across the Great Plains, they wouldn't be so impressive. Had they just flown into Denver, would have sucked. But the fact that they drove for hours and hours on wheat fields and plains, prairies, and now they hit this massive rock, amazing. So you got to have that. You got to have a little bit of that. And that's how the book goes. And in the end, they agree that you need both. So it's kind of a crummy ending, but brilliant book. And Don is the romantic in our matchup, and I'm the classicist, I think, which is really a twist for me mentally, because I always thought I was kind of a flighty guy. But Don has definitely got the, when a bird's dead on the side of the road, we stop, and he talks about it, and what an amazing human being, really. And I remember, this will really cause trouble, but for our American viewers, listeners, sorry, we were doing the Stanley Cup in Washington, and we had the honor of General Mark Milley, who was a great hockey player, played at Princeton. His father was a hockey player as well. His father fought at Iwo Jima and actually brought his hockey skates to Iwo Jima for good luck. Anyway, Mark Milley is now Don Trump's senior military advisor, chief of staff. And we have him on Hockey Night in Canada. And I say to Mark Milley, General Milley, I say, Don really likes your president. And he had a wink in his eye that was like to say, well, of course Don would like Donald Trump, but I often, if that wink or smile would have been construed or misconstrued, poor Mark, the general would have been in trouble, but it wasn't really on camera. There was a shot of Mark Milley going on the TV at the time. So, but I just got a kick out of how he laughed. Don loves Trump, of course. He watches, when we were doing that playoffs that year, Donald Trump had done an address in Nashville, and we should go back after the game with our beers and popcorn and peanuts and watch NHL Network and kind of debrief, Game 6 of the Stanley Cup. But that's not what we do. We watch Fox News, and Don is patting me or hitting me on the arm saying, now watch Trump here. Watch. Look at it. Now he's going to say this to get a rise out of this person over here. Watch this now. Here's where he's going to go off the proper. Watch. Here's this good. This is a really good part. Watch this again. Like he'll watch Trump speak 52 times in 3 days. He's so enthralled with how politicians or TV actors convey what it is that they're trying to get across. So it's really it's been fun, unbelievably fun. We're politically different, but we're both committed to the idea of.
Well, I've got a big question here. Somebody over the course of the summer leaked that Don actually knows how to say a lot of the names he messes up. Of course. But he does it just for a little bit of badness.
Ralph Mellenby taught him that in the get-go, at the get-go, is that, you start becoming professional, that's the end of you. So Don for sure works at Viesca and Longo, that's and he maintains, he'll say publicly, and it's true, Scotty Bowman doesn't get the names right. A lot of the great coaches didn't get the names right.
Pat Burns called him Daryl Gilmore in his opening press conference.
Yeah, Don is really a smart guy. He's well-read, extremely well-read. Most of it is naval history and a lot of biographies. He loves to read the biographies of the divas and the actors.
He doesn't read a lot of fiction. I remember him.
No, he doesn't.
That.
Yeah, autobiographies and history.
Ron, when you first, that's a big personality, and I appreciate you saying all that because someone's so close to him, and I often do some defending because I'm like, he's his own person, but he's way smarter than he lets on, and not that he comes off like an idiot, but way more.
No, but he cracks being the common man. He really wants the guy in the beverage hall and a guy. He's fighting political correctness or affirmative action, every step of the way, So, and there's again a point to be made in that. One of my favorite professors at University of Illinois is Ann Wortham, and she didn't even like Martin Luther King Jr. She would get mad at some of the, activists. She didn't want to be recognized as a woman. She didn't want to be recognized as black. She was so there's always sides to a story, and where you really pray, you kind of get it right, is being open to that idea that you don't know, that you're just becoming, you're just doing your best.
So how was that in the mid '80s when you just fell into that? Like all of a
sudden,
we
were friends from the beginning.
Intimidating. No?
One thing about Don, he's a instant, first impression guy. So whatever I did upon shaking his hand the first time I met him, he liked me. He knew, more important, he knew that I liked him. Because he can read it, he can smell it like the best bloodhound. So he definitely took a shine to me. I mean, he got mad at me for the little puns at the end of the coach's corner to try and offset some of the heaviness of what we had just talked about. It could be maybe ultra violent. It could be racist. It could be so. Yeah. There are things that Don does inadvertently that are just a little over the top, right? When you call Russians these people, it's a little, it's syntax, but words are important. I always say, I gave Tara Sloan the compliment of Margaret Somerville as an ethicist I read, and she wrote a book called The Ethical Canary, and the idea of it is, in the old days, miners brought a canary in a cage with them into the mines. If there was a poisonous gas, the canary would die. They didn't have them flying around or anything. They just had them there. And if there was any kind of poisonous gas leaking into the shaft, the canary would die. And that was their cue to get the hell out. So that's the ethical canary was based on that idea. If you don't recognize the danger or the poison in a word or in an approach, you'll end up in the explosion. So I always think that Don's got a good radar. He definitely won't get himself. He wouldn't mind getting fired. I don't think he'll ever quit or retire. I think he would like to go out in a blaze of glory. But now,
we should cut that. We don't want to give anyone any ideas.
Yeah. He's mischief, and he seems to always have known how to draw the line.
Well, there are similarities there with Trump, aren't there? I mean that in a totally straight up objective way. There are. They come across, what's the word? Not maybe aloof, but they know exactly what they're doing a lot of the time.
Absolutely.
Ron, before you go, I got to ask you. A lot of people. I was explaining this story today when I told my buddies you were coming on. I said, in the playoffs a few years ago, this dude was in the water and he rescued him. I said, the story is kind of foggy to me. I remember we talked about it. I even remember it being mentioned on the air for a little bit, but no one really knew what I was talking about. So I don't even really know either. Where was it? It was about 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah, Philadelphia. I feel like it was 2010, but it might have been the year Aaron's team was in. We were in the final, so it's probably 2010. Chicago beats Philly. We were staying at the Penn Hotel on the river, the Delaware River, and Don and I had after the morning skates, he had gone over to the old Spectrum to shoot his Rock'em Sock'em intros, and then we got back to the hotel and we were having lunch in the hotel. It was just us and a couple from France, and I remember the guy from France had a polo Ralph Lauren shirt with a horse on the chest, and he was there, and I was reminded, God, I got the Queen's Plate coming up in 9 days, and I'm not prepared. It kind of bothered me to see that horse. Anyway, those two moved out onto the patio in the blazing hot sun, and that's that. Don and I are talking about Dave Boland, and I'm having a beef dip. I don't remember what Don was having. So all of a sudden, this woman that I'd seen earlier, the woman from France and her husband, she comes in a panic and says, "Help, help, there's someone drowning in the river." So I sail a lot, so I knew that it's hard to pull a person out of the water. So I grabbed velvet ropes off the stanchions that were sort of dividing the bar from the restaurant, and I ran down to the pier, and it was quite a run. There's no way Don could have managed, because there was like about a 12-foot jump you had to start with, and then run. By the time I got there, the guy from France who had been out on the patio, he beat me to it. He was already in the water. His shirt was on the pier, and I remember looking at the horse on the shirt thinking, shit, I got the Queen's Plate coming up. Anyway, I climbed down the side of the pier, and he's pulling the man over to me, and the guy is taped in duct tape. He's completely taped, and he's tied up with yellow twine rope. Somebody either tried to kill him, or I can't imagine he was trying to kill himself, because it would have been impossible to tape himself the way he was taped up. But so the guy, as soon as he got him to me, he left. He was only in his underwear, this man from France. He just bolted the scene, knowing that there was a attempted murder had been going on. So I tried to pull the guy out of the water, and he weighed like 300 more pounds, because he had a downfill jacket on, and it had gotten soaked. So I struggled with the guy. I was holding him, with my right arm and keeping him out from falling under. And finally, people came to the top of the pier, which was about, 6 feet high. And I threw the velvet ropes up, and the two people at the top of the pier and myself were able to strong arm him out of the water. And then, eventually the hotel security got there, and eventually the police got there, and I left. But it was and I get back, and I sit down with Don, who he watched the whole thing from sort of the veranda of the deck. And he says, "Boy, you sure know how to screw up a Dave Boland story."
Fucking phenomenal!
Wow, that's incredible.
That's a great story. I didn't know that. I'm glad I asked.
That's just an epic one. Yeah,
guys. Now I guess, Ron, we've had you almost an hour and a half. I appreciate everything.
I'm sick of myself. I can only imagine the listener.
Yeah, and I know that, honestly, I don't know anybody else that is so busy, and this is for you to give up an hour and a half, 2 hours of your time is huge. Do you guys have any more questions?
I'm just curious. Are you still playing Friday night hockey in Oakville, Ontario?
I am. I play actually Tuesday, Wednesday during the winter. Okay. It's a group of Friday nighters, the FNHers, who play Fridays, that I skate with in the summers. But come winter, I go Tuesday in the Adult Safe Hockey League, and then Wednesday nights a bunch of guys playing shinny. And we look forward to the beer, of course, after more than we do the hockey, but still love the game. Yeah, and look at TR. He'll play ball hockey, ice hockey, any kind of hockey you can imagine.
Yeah. Field hockey.
Once you have a joy that comes from that, which I attained at age of 4, never want to give it up. And that's what's so encouraging to see all the, everybody that's. My wife plays it now 3 times a week. It's unbelievable. She used to think I was having an affair because I was so committed to the beer league hockey, right? But she now knows.
Do you know which of those guys has updated your Wikipedia page? Because on your Wikipedia page, it says known for co-host of CBC's Hockey Night in Canada and playing Friday night hockey in Oakville, Ontario.
Oh, I didn't see. No, I haven't noticed. Well, I'll tell you one story to close the show that is kind of a career moment. When at Hockey Night in Canada, when Rogers bought they paid $5 billion for the rights, 12-year contract, and they had a great idea to make the game more accessible to Canadians. They were going to have the Montreal Canadiens available on Sportsnet, the Leafs on CBC, the Ottawa Senators on, could be the Discovery Channel, who knows what property City TV would would be another one of theirs that they owned. So they really had this idea of distribution television, which would kind of take the emphasis off the intermissions. You would be more hockey more of the time, and you could go up and down the dial and just see hockey wall to wall. And they wanted a fresh face to front that. It was George Strombolopoulos, and that was great. And I was going to do a show called Rogers Hometown Hockey, where we go out in the communities and kind of celebrate the grassroots. And a lot of people felt that I'd been kind of, hung out to dry and put out to pasture, and I didn't feel that way at all. But anyway, I'm driving to London for the very first Rogers Hometown Hockey telecast, and on the radio comes Tower of Power.
Wow.
What is hip? And the lyric is there, so you start to let your hair grow, spend big bucks on your wardrobe, but somehow you know there's more to the trip. What is hip? Tell me if you think you know. If you're really hip, passing years are going to show. And I kind of thought to myself, well, that's true. My passing years, maybe it has all caught up to me. What is hip today might become passé. And it was a really nice sort of calming song about don't you worry about a thing. Not only that I might have passed, but that if anybody's committed to being hip, they're going to have to keep making changes, because nothing stays hip unless it's, history will tell us what's good. So really, I go to Mount Pearl to visit Terry's mom and dad. I go down into the basement, and what song is playing? Tower of Power, What is Hip? It is the most unbelievable for Senior to have that on when I went over to his place. It's just a crazy band. I'd never even heard of it. But that song came on before that first show and just kind of reminded me that, things come and go, and don't you worry about it. Who gives a shit? Just be, as Grapes would say, paddle thine own canoe and to thine own self be true. That's he used to always tell. So.
Fantastic way to close. Ron, I will leave you with this. Well, we know where we're going, but we don't know where we've been. And we know what we're knowing, but can't say where what we've seen. And we're not little children.
You're not done. Sorry.
And we know what we want, and the future is certain. Give us time to work it out. And I was going to say, what's certain is that we will run into each other again in the future, even though it's not exactly certain. I know that much.
It is certain. Oh, you know it, TR. And as David Byrne would say, does anybody have any questions? No, we answered them all.
Okay. Great way to end, buddy. I really appreciate it. It was great to see you this summer, and I'm sure I'll see you again soon. I'm not going to ask yet. Tara said that I might be pretty happy with some of the destinations of hometown hockey this year.
Yeah.
But I'll let you explain it when it happens.
Yeah, we will meet again soon. Okay, I hope Todd Perrin closed his restaurant.
He actually just opened up another one about a block and a half away from where we're sitting.
One more hangover. I can deal with one more hangover.
Stick to the fish and chips this time. Don't get yelled at by Don.
Right. Must have been the seal meat.
Ron, thanks a
million.
Thank
you so much.
Thanks, Charles. Thanks, Mike. And thank you, Terry. Love you. We'll see you soon.
Love you, too. Thanks for coming again, buddy. We'll see you soon. Penny Posh, maternity wear reimagined. Breaking the barriers of style, fit, and comfort that often leave mothers-to-be uninspired in their new wardrobe, Penny Posh's designs have reinvented a clothing category often seen as disposable, temporary, and unattractive. Well, not with Penny Posh. Check it out. A continuous fit maternity collection from bump to bundle and beyond. You can check them out on Twitter at Penny_Posh, on Instagram at PennyPosh_maternity, and of course on their website, www.pennyposhdesigns.com. Penny Posh Designs, maternity wear reimagined.
All right, so again, huge thank you to Ron MacLean. I still can't believe we got to chat to him for, I think it was like a little over an hour and a half.
Yeah,
it was absolutely incredible. Again, it's super funny to me too that it took us like an hour and 15 for him to bring up Coach's Corner.
I tell you,
like it took us that long to just bring up the idea of like Hockey Night in Canada. Really, it was just insanity. He's had such an incredible career, incredible life, and he's just such an interesting and amazing person to talk to.
Yeah, I can go lie down in the yard now and die. You can just lay me to rest back in your backyard there.
Yeah, see, I've had those conversations with Ron for years, so it's a lot of what he told me was, it was there. I had to dig it out because it's in a drunken haze.
Yeah.
And not that every time I see Ron, we're fucking drunk either, but you know what I mean?
No.
You go to these, it certainly seems like that when I talk, but, we see a lot of each other at these events, like golf tournaments, say. And, what do you do at a golf tournament? You sit there and you tie one on. So when we're always...
We're a team of doctors. How crazy can it get?
Yeah, exactly. In Manitoba, we were out there, and Ron got... When he said they bought me, so that people... put money down and get to golf with you for the whole day. So I'll go for like, I don't know, $500 or $1,000. Ron went for like 20 grand.
Yeah.
And now people are there to spend money.
Yeah.
So I don't.
It's
even think,
fundraising. It's for a great cause. Aaron's Chance to Play is an incredible organization.
Yeah. So like each time I see him is filled with beer and food and festivities and people and interesting people in your meeting, and it's just always so we just consume so much information from that particular town that we're in, being Portage la Prairie last month, that often the stories, I forget where one stops and the other starts, or the timing. Like he told a couple stories and I'd heard them before. I didn't know if they happened 2 years ago or 40 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, and Ron has that way about him that he'll tie in music and he'll tie in, maybe some pop culture event, or maybe, his favorite color. When he brings it all together, it's almost like time is linear. Like there's no, it's not linear.
It's
it's
a beautiful thing.
It's beautiful.
It's shocking to me that he talks about not being somebody who like read a lot growing up or whatever, because he's just such like he's just got such a literary mind, and he's just such a natural like narrative, like raconteur is I think the only way you can kind of describe Ron. He's just such a natural storyteller who has such an incredible ability to just weave information that he's accumulated together in a coherent way that does exactly what it's supposed to do. Much better than I just did, even just trying to describe what he does. It's incredible.
One thing that that's always gonna stick with me about this is when I asked him, "Do you still feel pressure?" He more like that to me. It's like, Jesus Christ, you're Ron MacLean.
I know.
You're like, and that's like, wow. And of course he had this, you just heard it, so I'm not going to paraphrase it. This beautiful way of summing it up. But yeah, holy shit.
Yeah, it's incredible. I can't thank him enough. I know we're all kind of really happy that we had a chance to chat to him. Is there anything? I know we want to. It's a Friday evening as we recorded this, so we're getting ready to
the last
do a couple
thing
things.
I'll say about Ron MacLean, because you're going to hear the interview, and what always amazes me is how many names he remembers and incidents. Remember when we're going to talk in a second about he remembered how many points I had the first game.
Yeah.
That happened, guys. That happened in 1996, 97. Yeah. It was early 97, about February, and he remembers that game.
Yeah.
And he mentioned it in Hockey Night Canada. Every Hockey Night Canada since, he's had someone else to mention, someone else. And I haven't talked about that with him. I talked about it on my podcast because it stood out to me, but it's not like I go, Ron, remember that time you mentioned me on Hockey Night Canada? It never, ever comes up. So he just remembered that.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, sometimes when we've got a few beers in us and we're having a great chat, because Ron likes to open up at these things and everything, and he'll never come out and say it, but the gist I get is that have you ever taken it's part of why I got a folklore degree, like some subjects you'll take it and you'll study and you'll remember it because you go over the words and everything, but some it's actually fun to do the course, so you remember, like if you're doing a history of music course, you probably remember that a little bit more because we know a lot about the bands that we're going to study about going in, right? And it's interesting. Oh my God, really? Like the thing he told you about the three Beatles hitting that note on the final of A Day in the Life, the final note. So interesting things like that, like I don't forget because I love the Beatles. So Ron is like that with small. That's the reason he remembers it, because he loves it and he cares about it.
Yeah.
So a lot of politicians might say, I care about something. I just say that because they're the biggest group. That
Terry's
would say
politician
that.
Voice. If you ever hear that, he's running.
Yeah, exactly. Terry's running again. But they might say that they care about something.
Yeah.
They might have the knowledge to back it up because they studied it. But Ron remembers so much because he generally gives a fuck.
I know.
And so he goes doing this hometown hockey, guys, all over Canada. He just told us he did 45 golf events this year. 45. I might meet him at 5 of those. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, if I'm lucky. So, like, when I say, I saw you in Charlottetown in Manitoba, like, that they were spread out by 2 months. He's been to 30 other small towns in Canada, doing the same thing. Then the hockey season starts, and then he does it. And then he picks out people from that community, brings them on, and talks about them passionately, and with them about what their likes, dislikes, about the community, about everything else. So Ron remembers so much because he's passionate and he cares.
The thing that shocks me about Ron MacLean, and always has, and I just got to have a conversation with him, which kind of reinforced it, is that Ron MacLean he's a national fucking treasure, right? Like he's been the anchor of Hockey Night in Canada for years. He's co-hosted, Coach's Corner. He's been kind of this institution 4 years. He's a big deal. And so for me, as a guy who, has this podcast with you guys and got a chance to talk to Ron MacLean, that's a huge deal. Because, last year I did the carpet for Halloween. I got to meet Jamie Lee Curtis, and I remember every moment of that interaction because I got to meet Jamie Lee Curtis. And there's those when you meet these people that you kind of hold to that regard, you kind of remember every little bit of it because it was such a big deal to you. And Ron MacLean is like that with literally every person he's ever had a fucking conversation with, and it's mind-boggling.
Like he's generally impressed.
He just holds on to everything from everybody because he's not just like lip service and a handshake. He's engaging with people in such a real way that he just retains everything about them, and it's incredible.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, he's definitely my favorite weatherman.
Imagine that. You'll hear about that in a minute.
Well, on that, guys, I guess we'll take a break for this week. We'll be back next week, hopefully. TR is going to be up in Letterkenny in between.
We'll figure it out.
Upper Canada.
We're just not going to have an exact day that this comes out all the time. It might be Monday. It might be Tuesday. In any case,
it's going to dance
still
around.
Still summer. We talked about let us enjoy our August. It's still summer.
But we are back. We will be more regular. And in the meantime, if you're really missing us and you haven't checked it out yet, make sure to check out TR's content on Spittin' Chicklets with the guys over there. There's 2 episodes of Road Warriors on YouTube now, and there's a full episode as well as this episode from last summer. So you can check all that stuff out. And in the meantime, if you just want to hear what I have to say, you can find me on Twitter at HickeyMike.
I'm Smokes Indoors.
I'm Terry Ryan 2020 on Instagram, Terry Ryan 20 on Twitter. What I will say is I just want to reiterate that I'm available for public speaking. I always forget to really promote that on here, but I've been getting a lot of gigs lately, and sometimes there's various forms. I just go on stage and kind of do a Q&A with a host. Tyler McDonald, who's a great comedian, is having me up in Ontario in the near future to do that. Me and Biz did one in Toronto. So there's all kinds of avenues, and I enjoy doing it. And the more I do it, the more people kind of ask me why I don't do it more. I guess the reason is because I don't promote it. But here I am doing that. So if you ever need me, you know where to get me.
And we are everywhere at 3MI Podcast, so you can find us that way, which I'm guessing you already have. And until then, we'll be back at you next week to shout at you about hockey.
Why do you hang around with the worst crowd? The worst crowd, the worst crowd.